To be upstanding for the Right Worshipful, the Ceremonial Mayor of the City of Salford, Councillor Anne-Marie Humphreys.
Good morning, everybody. Please can I ask you to stand and join me in civic prayers, which this morning will be conducted by Reverend Philip Belly from the Bolton Methodist Circuit. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, thank you for the invitation and the privilege of leading prayers this morning. Let us pray. Sovereign Lord, we pray for your blessing on each and all of the councillors of this great city of Salford, as they meet together here for this formal council meeting. We thank you for each and all of these councillors, especially for the great honour, privilege, and even greater responsibility that they bear as they serve and lead. We pray that this privilege and responsibility will be honoured by them in all the debates, discussions, and decisions made here. We thank you, Sovereign Lord, for all the time, the work, and the dedication they show. And we pray that they will feel fulfilled in their activities and duties, despite the inevitable frustrations they face as our country goes through this time of economic problems. We pray for wisdom, for strength, for courage to do what's right and good, and that they will act with love and compassion for the common good. We thank you, Sovereign Lord, for those many people who work for and serve this council, enabling it to operate smoothly, and all those who work for the city and people of Salford in so many different ways. And we pray for this city in all its diversity, especially as we pray for the council's vision to create a fairer, greener, and healthier Salford. And I pray for the worshipful ceremonial mayor as she goes about her civic duties, that she will be an inspiration to all those she meets. Sovereign Lord, hear our prayers. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Belly. Please be seated, everyone. So, welcome everybody here today. Item 1, announcements or special business. The only thing to say is to welcome the pupils here from Benos Israel High School, who are here with their teacher, Mrs. Bergman. You're very welcome today. Thank you. Item 2 is apologies. Do we have any apologies for today's council meeting?
Yep, I received apologies from councillors Brocklehurst, Cohen, Karen Garrido, Hines, Jones, Morris, Mullen, Twells, Ward, Warner and Warren.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any personal, prejudicial or disposable pecuniary interests that they need to declare at this meeting? In which case, can I ask those members to declare them, explain the nature of the interest and to which specific agenda item it relates to? Declarations should be specific, relevant and not merely a general indication of your membership of a particular organisation or outside body. Okay, thank you. And item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of November. Are the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 16th of November 2022 approved as a correct record? Do I have a proposer? Councillor Brabiner and seconder. Councillor Womsham, thank you. Item 5, we have questions from the public. We have 2 public questions. So, question 1. Can I firstly invite Leslie Hurst to ask her question, after which Councillor John Merry, Deputy City Leader and Lead Member for Adult Social Care, will respond. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leslie. A frontline social care worker is what I am. When Aspire was established in 2016, through the council outsourcing a number of adult services, the council gave a commitment to Aspire staff that they would see no negative impact on the transfer. However, Aspire staff have still not received the 2022-23 NJC pay award that was paid to all directly employed council staff in December. What will the council do to ensure that those staff receive the pay award and to assure that those Aspire staff who are not on NJC terms and conditions receive a comparable pay increase? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I ask Councillor Merry to respond, please?
Thank you very much, Leslie, for that question, and it's good to see members of Unison outside. It was good to see the dedication of union members turning out in the cold to support you in your beliefs. As you're probably aware by now, in a sense, you're pushing at an open door that we've decided to make that commitment for this year, and in principle, because obviously that's subject to the Budget Council in February, to make that commitment for the following year as well. And there's a general point I'll make before specifically dealing with it, which is that sometimes union negotiations are messy, complex and difficult, but we've worked very effectively with Steve and his team to try and get these issues resolved. And how much better it is as an organisation to actually spend your time talking to each other rather than simply being in a situation of refusing to negotiate but trying to make life more difficult for your employees. I think there's a huge contrast between the attitude of City Mayor, if I may say so, and the attitude of the present government to try to resolve the disputes. We've now resolved this issue, I hope. You will have heard from Aspire that we've made that public commitment, and we've made that commitment thanks to a lot of hard work by everybody concerned, not least of which has been the efforts of employees to see it through. So we're now in a position, yes, we are guaranteeing that not just for people who are transferred under the sort of TUPE terms and conditions, but for all staff in Aspire. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Merry. Can I ask Ms Hurst if she wishes to ask a supplementary question, but this should only be in regard or seeking clarification on the response she has received from the Deputy City Mayor? Thank you, Ms Hurst. Now, question 2 is, can I now invite Mike Kelly to ask his question, after which John Merry, Deputy City Mayor and Lead Member for Adult Social Services, will respond. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Mayor and ladies and gentlemen of the Council. My name is Michael Kelly. I work at Aspire as a support level 3 worker. We would like to thank the Mayor and the Councillors for their commitment in supporting the Aspire staff with a pay award according to the NJC agreement, in addition to the extra days annual leave in these difficult and challenging times. And following on from this, we would like to ask the question, can the Council guarantee that Aspire staff will not need to face the same uncertainty every year, and commit that those staff on NJC terms and conditions will receive the same pay awards as their directly employed colleagues, and that those staff who are not will also receive fair and comparable pay increases? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Kelly. Can I ask Councillor John Merry to respond, please?
Personally, I'd love to be able to be in that situation, but unfortunately, government doesn't seem to want us to be in that position because we and the City Mayor on this subject get a single year settlement every year, and we have to make our decisions on the basis of the following 12 months. So what I can't guarantee, unfortunately, is that there is a permanent solution to this position that doesn't without being able to guarantee the funding. We have asked through the Local Government Association for a 3-year settlement, so at least we have some sort of permanence about the situation, but we've not been given that by government. We're not in a position to commit future funding as things stand at the moment. And I'm afraid it's a fundamental principle of public administration at the moment that I may not be in this position tomorrow or the next week or whatever. I can't guarantee what my successors would do. So I would love to be able to give you that guarantee. I will do my best. I will fight for you, and I will try and make sure that that is the situation. I'm pretty sure that the Mayor will fight for you as well in that situation and want to see that happen. So we'll do our best.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Can I ask Mr Kelly if he wishes to ask a supplementary question, but this should only be in regard or seeking clarification on a response he has received from the Deputy City Mayor? Okay, thanks, Mr Kelly. We'll move on to item 6, which is receipts of petitions or communications. Do we have any petitions that need to be received? Is that no? Item 7, appointments to committees, panels and outside bodies. The City Solicitor is asked to present this report, which details amendments to the membership of the Children's Scrutiny Panel and a number of appointments to outside bodies for the municipal year 2022-2023, after which I will ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Under the Constitution, the Council is required to approve or note as appropriate membership of committees, panels and appointments to outside bodies. The report notes recent appointments to the Children's Scrutiny Panel, and in particular I asked members to note that there was a late correction to this report in that the Governor representative listed on that report is Philip Roebuck, not Philip Rose, as was printed in the initial papers. And secondly, Council is also asked to note
Thank you, City Solicitor. Proposer and a seconder. Councillor Brooks. Councillor Hamilton, thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. Now move on to item 8, Greater Manchester Joint Clean Air Scrutiny Committee. The City Solicitor is asked to present this report. Can everybody hear me? Which details proposals for the establishment of a Greater Manchester Joint Clean Air Scrutiny Committee, and for Salford Council to appoint a member and substitute member to it, after which I will permit questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The report asks Council to agree to the establishment of a Greater Manchester Joint Scrutiny Committee to scrutinise the decisions of the Clean Air Charging Authorities Committee and the Clean Air Administration Committee, both of which are joint committees already established by the Greater Manchester authorities. The report also asks for the Council to nominate and agree a representative and a substitute from Salford City Council to sit on the Joint Scrutiny Committee. The proposed terms of reference for this Joint Scrutiny Committee are as Appendix 1 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, City Solicitor. Do we have any questions or comments? Oh, sorry. Can we have a proposer first, please? Councillor Whitaker, Councillor Fletcher. Sorry, was Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was just a quick comment, really, since obviously, am I right to assume, since it should be proposed and seconded, that it's already been agreed to now? Is that correct? Or does there need to be a vote taken on this? Does there need to be a vote taken on this? That's not my apologies. Doing 6 foot is an issue. I just want to double check. Will there be a vote taken on this now? There will be. All right, fantastic. To be honest, I've had a quick look through this, and I really think, as much as I want to scrutinise the Clean Air Zone and the Clean Air Zone tax, I really feel that the issue of this and the idea that this can be called a scrutiny panel, I just think is a little bit over the clouds. I don't feel that we've had any scrutiny on the Clean Air Zone. I think this particularly, I know councillors know what the word scrutiny means, but I feel like it fails on this council quite ferociously, and I don't think that this is a real scrutiny panel or a real scrutiny to scrutinise anything. The chances are it will just be another Labour councillor, and of course the Labour Party were in favour of the Clean Air Zone tax for the last couple of years. We've been told for the last couple of years by the Greater Manchester Mayor that this was all the government's fault, that it was the government's fault for the reason that we had to introduce a Clean Air Zone tax. It was the government's fault that we had to introduce charges. It was the government's fault that we had to include the entirety of Greater Manchester, whereas in actual fact it was all down to the Greater Manchester Mayor, and I don't feel like we can get real scrutiny by just allowing another member to take the position.
Sorry to interrupt, a point of information from the City Mayor.
Thank you very much, Ceremony Mayor. I'm going to have to correct the record, because the official position at the moment of the Combined Authority in Greater Manchester is we're asking government for a Category B non-charging zone, and I stress non-charging zone. So I wouldn't mind my colleague retracting his statement there. The position of the Combined Authority is a non-charging zone Category B. Thank you very much. We're awaiting the government's response to all of this.
So confirm, Mr Mayor, yourself and other members of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority for many years called for a charging zone. It was a very well-known policy. If that's not the case now, then obviously that's good news, and I'm happy to hear that. But for a long time, that was the issue of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I don't feel like we've had a lot of scrutiny on this issue. And I don't feel like this scrutiny panel in particular would do much different, which is why I don't think I can back it. Great to see democracy in action in the chamber. Lovely to see it. But I think as it goes, I've said all I need to say. I don't think we can back this.
Thank you. Right, just bear with me 1 moment, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murray, please. Quiet, please. Councillor Murray.
I'm sorry, where have the Conservative group been for the last 6 months, right? Obviously not actually following this terribly closely, because the point being is that for a significant length of time, right, we on the Combined Authority, thanks to Councillor Mayor Dennett, have been making it absolutely clear that we do not want to introduce a charging zone for Greater Manchester. We made that crystal clear. The only reason we had this in the first place was due to pressure from government and the mandation that they asked us to carry out. Now we're in a situation where we're hopeful, we're trying to get government to change their mind. It is a Conservative policy, let's be clear about this, that is trying to force Greater Manchester along the way of a congestion zone charging policy. Right, so it's all very well to say, oh, I never realised, I thought the policy from the Labour Party was to demand a charging zone. I suggest you listen a bit more to debates in this council chamber and elsewhere that makes it crystal clear what our policy is. And I'm supportive of the scrutiny committee, because when the Conservatives, if they do insist on us having some sort of charging zone, we need to scrutinise it with the utmost vigour and to make sure that our at the position of the particular people I represent in Broughton is actually well represented.
So Councillor Rideau had indicated he wanted to speak already.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The position as far as we're concerned is very simple. We're not here to actually
Quiet,
debate.
please.
We're not here to actually debate the clear air zone today. All we're here is to vote on whether we agree with the setting up of the Greater Manchester Scrutiny Committee. We are against there just being the one Greater Manchester Scrutiny Committee. What we think, in fact, is that each of the local authorities, said local authorities, should be able to discuss this individually and then feed that through to Greater Manchester. That's what we're against today. We're not discussing the clear air zone policy as such. We're saying that it's not democratic just to have one person from each local authority sitting on the Greater Manchester panel. We want a greater say than that, and we want the decision to be discussed here and not just in Greater Manchester. And that's why we're voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Rideau. 1 moment, please. Okay, Councillor McCusker, were you indicating?
It was just to say that currently the situation is in each of the 10 local authority boroughs, we are able to scrutinise. This is about an overarching scrutiny committee which covers the 10 boroughs. So that what Councillor Garrido is asking for already exists. We already have the power to do that.
Right, thank you, Councillor McCusker. Is anyone else indicating to speak on this before we move to the vote? Do the proposer or seconder want to say anything further to close this? Okay, can we go to the vote then, please? Show of hands. All in favour? All against? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, move to item 9 now, please. Salford City Council Constitution Amendment to Article 9, Quorum for Standards Committee. The City Solicitor is asked to present this report, which details proposed amendments to Article 9 of Salford City Council Constitution and the quorum of the Standards Committee, after which I will permit questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Members, this is a slightly technical report. The report proposes some changes to the Constitution to clarify the quorum for the Standards Committee. The proposed changes are set out in the report, and the amended Constitution, as proposed, can be found at page 30. The Standards Committee considered the proposed changes on the 8th of December 2022 and recommended that these be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, City Solicitor. Do we have any questions or comments? Sorry, a bit of a confusion there. Could I have a proposer and a seconder for this, please? Thank you. Councillor Yode. Councillor. So, any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you. That's carried. Yep. Thank you. Move on to item 10, Audits and Accounts Committee Annual Report. Please can I ask Councillor Les Turner as the Chair to present this report, which details the activities of the Audit and Accounts Committee during 2021-2022, after which I will permit questions.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you've all got the report. It's clearly set out in front of you. It has been to Cabinet. Actually, the report covers a lot of the period that I wasn't Chair. My predecessor
sitting to my right was, and I thank him for all the work he's done. I also would like to take the opportunity to thank all the officers that have been involved in helping our committee. The committee has very good attendance, and we go into all the things. The only thing that is outstanding is, of course, we haven't got the sign-off of the 2021 accounts from external audit. We were hoping this month, and we've got a meeting next week, but unfortunately there are further SIPFA recommendations that have to be sifted through, for want of a better word, to make sure that we are complying with it. It is important, the Audit Commission is one of, I think, the most important committees that we have, and I think as far as the Council goes, there are no issues that give any rise for concern, so we'll leave it like that and hopefully keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Do I have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Saunders, seconder? Councillor Breeder. Any questions or comments? No, that's carried then, isn't it? Is that carried? Yeah, thank you. So move on to item 11, appointment of Council Chief Executive as place-based lead for health and care integration in Salford. Before you is a report detailing and seeking endorsement to the appointment of Tom Stannard, Salford City Council Chief Executive as place-based lead for health and care integration in Salford. Any questions or comments? Or do I have to go through the proposal first? Yeah, okay, I'll let the City Solicitor do that first, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So this report relates to the appointment of the Chief Executive as the place-based lead for the health and care integration in Salford. NHS Greater Manchester, the Integrated Care Board, was established on the 1st of July 2022. Government guidance sets out that the expectation within the area covered by an integrated care system is that the ICB will appoint one person as overall lead for health and care at a place level. The ICB has appointed 10 place-based leads for each of the 10 localities in Greater Manchester. The ICB has appointed Tom Stannard, our Chief Executive, as place-based lead for health and care in Salford. The report sets out the duties and accountabilities for the Chief Executive in this role as place-based lead, and Council should note that the appointment of the Chief Executive to this role is not a decision of Council. Council is therefore asked to note and endorse the appointment. This is an additional contract and does not impact on the duties of the Chief Executive in his primary role as Chief Executive. Thank you.
Thank you, City Solicitor. The Council is asked to endorse the appointment of Tom Stannard, Salford City Council Chief Executive, as place-based lead for health and care integration in Salford. Do I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor. Yep. Councillor Barnes and Councillor Birch. Councillor Birch. Any questions, any comments? Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to item 12, Salford Local Plan, Development, Management Policies and Designations. Can I ask Councillor Mike McCusker, Lead Member for Planning and Sustainable Development, to present this report, after which I will permit questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this plan's been a long time coming. We started preparing for this when the Liberal Conservative coalition was in place. We've been through 5 Prime Ministers over the time of its preparation. So we've prepared the Salford Local Plan Development Management Policies and Designations, which we're calling the Local Plan Part 1, because it forms part of the Statutory Development Plan for the City and will provide the main policies that will be used to manage development and determine planning applications in Salford and identify designations that will protect the city's most important environmental assets, town centres and infrastructure, and it covers a period from now until 2037. But its contents may remain relevant after that date. So the stages up into, including the revised draft local plan related to a complete local plan, but because of the delays in the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, which has now become Places for Everyone, we felt it necessary to split the local plan into two parts, with this one covering development management policies and designations, and part two will come with the Places for Everyone. So this decision's allowed the City Council to put in place up-to-date planning policy framework for determining planning applications and identifying designations to protect the city's most important environments, such as the West Salford Greenway. Places for Everyone will be adopted in summer 2024 at the earliest, subject to it being sound and legally compliant at the ongoing public examination. Current government consultation on changes to the National Planning Policy Framework and the planning system has created some uncertainty, but the examination of Places for Everyone is continuing. So part two will be progressed following hearings of sessions and related work on PFE, when it's shown what the implications are for Salford in terms of the sub-regional spatial strategy and district requirements for housing and employment. In terms of the scope of the plan, the independent planning inspector appointed by the Secretary of State to examine the plan considered the role and scope of the plan as part of his first examination. The inspector overwhelmingly supported the City Council's approach on this matter, setting out in his approach that in his assessment, by not undertaking such an approach, it's clear to him that the policies for development management purposes to determine plan applications in Salford will be unlikely to be updated for a considerable period of time. So he completely accepted our approach towards splitting the plan. So we've been asked today to adopt the plan. So the government's national planning practice guidance is clear that the expectations of the local planning authority when a plan has been found sound says that while a local planning authority is not legally required to adopt its local plan following examination, it will have been through a significant process locally to engage communities and other interests in discussion about the future of the area, and it's to be expected that the authority will proceed quickly with adopting a plan that has been found sound. In March 20, the government set out a deadline of December 2023 for all councils to have an up-to-date local plan in place. The reasons the plans are recommended for adoption today are set out in paragraphs 6.2 to 6.6 of the council report in front of you. And they are that the law requires the local planning authority to keep under review and update its development plan. Fairness is at the heart of the plan and aligns with the council's vision to create a fairer, greener and better Salford and the Great 8 priorities of the Mayor. The plan will help to tackle climate change and support carbon neutral Salford by 2038 and working towards net zero carbon by 2028 by having up-to-date planning policies on issues such as biodiversity net gain, green infrastructure, design, sustainable transport and energy efficiency. It will have area-based policies that set out clear direction for those parts of the city that will experience the greatest levels of growth, such as the city centre and Salford Quays. Designations will protect the most important environmental assets, such as the West Salford Greenway. Not adopting would mean relying on the UDP, which was adopted in 2006, with the majority of policies saved from 2009. And the plan and its policies is increasingly out of date and will be subject to challenge through decision making, for example, as through the Broad Oak appeals, when Peel argued that the Gateway policy was out of date and therefore the weight given to the policy should be greatly reduced as part of the planning balance exercise. And producing the plan has been a long and costly process which has involved 7 rounds of public consultations. Not adopting would mean a significant waste of public resources and undermine the confidence in the planning regime in the city. So, the current consultation on the changes to the MPPF it indicates that we'll have no implications for the adoption of our local plan part 1, given the scope of the local plan and that its examination was completed on the receipt of the inspector's report. Potential wider changes to the planning system will need to be fully consulted on and will need parliamentary approval with a view to being implemented from late 2024 and therefore no implications for the adoption of this Local Plan Part 1. So I therefore ask the Council to accept the findings of the Planning Inspector's report into the Local Plan Part 1, including the main modifications that are necessary for the plan to be sound. That we adopt the plan which incorporates the main modifications, and that we adopt the policies map, which is in Annex 5, which incorporates the modifications and is necessary to give effect to the policies of the Salford Local Plan Part 1. And it delegates authority to the Strategic Director of Place to make any minor, non-material editorial amendments to the plan and policies map ahead of its final publications. And these amendments will be limited to correcting minor errors and formatting text. So therefore I would ask that we accept and adopt the local plan. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McCusker. As you are proposer of that, do we have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Mashter. Can we have any questions or comments, please? Councillor Garrido.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't intend to repeat everything that was said last year, this time last year. We made it very clear then, and the situation has not changed, that we were against putting forward a partial local plan. We felt it was not the right thing to do. We felt that the plan should have been a total plan, including the designation of green spaces, as well as everything else that it includes. There are clearly good things in the plan, and certainly in terms of some of the things that are included, we're not against it, but we're against the principle that this has been done as a partial plan rather than a full plan. Councillor McCusker says it's been a long time coming. Well, all the more reason why, for all the years it's taken to bring it this far, all the more reason why, in fact, it should have been a complete plan and not a partial plan. We're at the moment going through the Places for Everyone public examination, which includes issues that should eventually be included in the local plan, and I think it would have been far better to wait until that process had been completed before we make any decision on the full plan. So for that reason, we're not going to support this, and we're not going to support it, not because it's a bad plan, but because it's incomplete, and that's the reason why we're not supporting it. We do look forward, nevertheless, to the remaining reports, Part 2, to come before the Council, and I think that should be dealt with at the earliest possible opportunity, because there are a number of issues to do with the second part of the plan, which local people are extremely interested in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrido. Councillor Saunders? Councillor Keeley? Did you both want to speak? Well, whichever of you wants to speak first.
Having to fight it out. I'm going to bring the microphone up. Les, don't really head back. We're just all eager to speak. Yeah, to be honest, there's not much more that has to be said on the back of Councillor Garrido. Don't worry, not long, Councillor Murray. I will keep it short. There's not much more that has to be said. It was a fantastic read over the last few weeks. Just for reference, it was only 7 pages shorter than the latest Prince Harry novel, so it was an excellent read. A really long report, but I think the issue for me in particular, if you looked on page 336, that's of the agenda, not of the report, because there's different page numbers. 336, when it's particularly talking about the sites of biological, it's talking about environmental and the various protected sites within that, and those areas would be within a certain radius of homes or within a certain radius of people. The issue, what I'm concerned about, is obviously that they are given a certain status, and that it may be difficult, even though statuses are awarded in different ways, it may be difficult to sustain such a a status of importance in terms of environment and biological if we are over-urbanising in that area, particularly with buildings. Obviously, if you look at what's happened in Liverpool, it's a completely different status regarding the docks, which has been taken away because of the over-urbanisation. Again, it's a different status, like I've just said, but what I'm concerned about in these areas is that the plan might not take that into account. I know that places for nobody's been mentioned in certain areas, but I think, obviously, I agree with Councillor Garrido that really we should be waiting for the full report, and also, Madam Mayor, I would like a recorded vote on this one.
Just one moment, please. Councillor Saunders, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and can I also join in welcoming the girls from the Bonossi Swell School in Kersal. Can I, obviously further to my two colleagues, yes, it is a long read, and I'd like to thank the various officers and the inspector for all the time they've put in. I'm particularly glad to see that the names Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, which sounded like something out of Star Trek, has now been replaced by Places for Everyone. If we wanted to be really snazzy, we could even make the 4 into the number 4 and call it Places for Everyone. I'm particularly pleased to see, yes, in the long read, references to Kersal, the heritage and culture of Kersal, such as Kersal Moor, Kersal Dale, etc. And I'm particularly pleased to see a couple of roads in Kersal, including my own road, Leicester Road, and Cheetham Hill, the part in Salford, is referred to as an area particularly important for shopping, and I think that that's very important. I would have rather seen also Littleton Road included in that, but we can't have everything. Now, my final point is one that I'm going to make slightly tongue-in-cheek, but not totally tongue-in-cheek. I know the press are not here, but I'm assuming they are watching online. The plan makes some has some lofty ambitions, quite rightly, for the prosperity of Salford environment, etc. Refers to climate change and the effect that that's having. One thing that is very important, in my view, for the future prosperity and environment of Salford is the environment. And unfortunately, at the moment, there are the streets. On many streets are not fit for purpose. There are too many potholes. The streets are not cleaned as they should be, etc. And I think I'm going to take this opportunity to mention this now, because I think discussing a plan for the next 15 years, or 14 years, I think it is, till 2037, I think that's important to make that point. Now, this final point, which I say is slightly, but not totally tongue-in-cheek, a few days ago, I had a light bulb moment. I've not finished yet. I'm about to compare myself to Moses as well. I had a light bulb moment. I noticed one of the many potholes in my ward, and I looked at it, a bit like Moses did at the burning bush. And then I noticed that the pothole went down several inches, but then it unearthed cobbles, and the cobbles were intact. The cobbles were unaffected by the rain that we'd been having. So, like Moses, who wondered why the burning bush didn't burn, my answer was a little bit more pragmatic and less miraculous, and I realised that cobbles are more enduring than the tarmac that we use at the moment. And so I thought, at the end of the day, Salford cobbles are part of Salford's heritage and culture. As any aficionado of Coronation Street, or long-standing aficionado of Coronation Street knows, cobbles are very much part of Salford's culture. So why not go back to cobbles? We wouldn't have the problem with potholes. It would provide for, an insurance against climate change, all of which is in the plan. It would provide employment. It would provide tourism if we could market ourselves as the only city in the country that has cobbles, etc. With
Order in
that,
the
I
chamber,
rest my
please.
case and look forward to seeing Salford recobbled. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Can I have City Mayor, please? Quiet, please. Quiet.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I wasn't going to come in on this, but Councillor Robin Garrido did actually prompt me to suggest that there isn't any urgency around ratifying this part of our local plan is just madness, to be perfectly honest with you. At the moment, we know we have developers in the city currently exploiting our policy framework because it isn't up to date. And what are we talking about when we talk about improving and enhancing the policy framework here within the local plan? Well, we're talking about social value and social impact, creating jobs and opportunities for people in the city through the construction industry and their associated value chain. We're also talking about tackling the housing and homelessness crisis. And as you will know, part of this phase of the local plan talks about increasing what we actually ask of developers in terms of delivering affordable homes in the city, at least 20% when schemes are brought forward. It also talks about improving environmental standards, placemaking, public realm. So I think to suggest that we pause this and link it with places for everyone is certainly not in the interests of the people of Salford and the communities we seek to serve and represent. But then when I reflect a little bit more on why Councillor Robin Garrido might be suggesting such, I am obviously struck by the fact that the Conservative Party receive significant donations from developers to keep their party going. And this is a matter of public record. Many of the broadsheets have detailed this. So maybe what actually sits behind what Councillor Robin Garrido is suggesting today in this chamber is the suggestion that we pause this so developers can continue to make money out of communities, residents and city councils like Salford. I think it is absolute madness to actually suggest we pause this today. It's in the interest of everyone in this city. We get on with this job. As Councillor McCusker has said, it's taken far too long for us to get to this position in the first place. And obviously the process is set out in legislation. The tests are set out in the government's own national planning policy framework for making progress with local plans. So I suggest we move quickly on this and start getting more investment into the city to actually serve our residents and communities. Thank you.
Thank you, City Mayor. Councillor Mashiter, please.
I wouldn't try and follow the City Mayor. It's a very quick one, Chair. Is that this is a fantastic plan. It's gone on for many, many years, and not a single challenge of the built environment has not been challenged by the policy team and the development management team in this City Council. And they are being crowned now the best planning authority in the country. And that is no mean feat. These guys have been running at this level for quite some time now, to say the very least. And the members of the Cabinet, myself, and the lead member especially, and the previous lead member have been very aware of the work that the planning team have put in right across for many, many years. And if we look back at 2012, when our core strategy was told that it was not sound because of our requirements for build space inside the new high density developments that we wanted to see, and then the next day a development comes in at planning panel with those build standards of space standards and to be built, and they did that, and so then we had to start our whole planning policy once again through this local plan. And to see it come to fruition today, I'm really, really pleased, to say the very least, especially at the same time, as I will say again, that we've been crowned the best planning authority in the country through policy and development management. So, yes, let's please get on with the vote, Chair. I move the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mashiter. Does anyone else want to speak? Right, so we did... Does the proposer or seconder, oh, you're the seconder, Councillor Mashiter, you've already spoken then, unless you want to say something else. Does the proposer wish to speak?
Just to respond to some of the comments from the Conservative. Obviously, this current Conservative government seems to want to push our health services back to the 1900s. I don't think our roads should go the same way. You know, this is a really important plan for all the reasons that have been stated. You know, about social value, about affordable homes, about biodiversity, and again, we'll be the first authority in the country that has set that limit. It's a really important document. It's really important we move it quickly. So I therefore would urge members to support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McCusker. We did have a request from Councillor Keeley for a named vote, which we do have to have 3 members to satisfy that. Do we have 3 members? So we've got Councillor Turner, Saunders and Garrido there indicating. So can we move to a named vote then, please?
Yep. City Mayor Paul Dennett. Councillor Marnagola. Councillor August. Councillor Bailey. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Bellamy. Councillor Bentham. Councillor Brabiner. Councillor Brooks. Councillor Birch. Councillor Kamel. Councillor Cusack. Councillor Dawson. Councillor Dickman. Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Robin Garrido. Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Keeley. Councillor Kelly. Councillor King. Councillor Lancaster. Councillor Leitner. Councillor Mashita. Councillor McCusker. Councillor Merry. Councillor Curran-Ziza. Councillor Pepper. Councillor Pevitt. Councillor Gina Reynolds. Councillor Neil Reynolds. Councillor Robinson-Smith. Councillor Rowland. Councillor Saeed. Councillor Saunders. Councillor Sharma. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Saeed. Councillor Teta. Councillor Turner. Councillor Wade. Councillor Wayne. Councillor Walters. Councillor Warmisham. And Councillor Yowd. That's 39 votes for and 5 against. That's 39 votes for and 5 against.
Right, thank you. So that is carried. Just to let members know that we do need to go back to item number 8 on the agenda, as the City Solicitor has pointed out that there is an error on there she wishes to point out. Thank you.
Sorry members, I made a mistake in presenting this report in that I didn't say the names that have been proposed in respect of the nominations to the committee. So this is item 8 is the establishment of the Greater Manchester Joint Clean Air Scrutiny Committee. The recommendations and what Council was asked to agree was the establishment of the committee, to agree the terms of reference of the committee, and to agree the appointment of a member and a substitute to the committee. All 3 were agreed, but the names had been provided to me yesterday as to the proposed nominations. So it's Councillor Saeed as the nominated representative and as substitute Councillor Hamilton. Are Council happy to agree that that goes into the minutes? Oh, sorry, was it Councillor Barnes? My mistake. So Councillor Saeed and Councillor Barnes, would you wish to reopen for debate and take a vote? main member? I assume that's main member. Councillor Keeling. Okay. So we would need to take a vote. Can we go by show of hands firstly for... Is that right? Show of hands? Yeah. Yep. Show of hands for Councillor Saeed in the first instance. I think that's carried. And for substitute, is there any second name for substitute? Substitute is Councillor Barnes. Show of hands, please. Carried. Thank you, members. I apologise for my mistake.
Okay, thank you, City Solicitor. So we are now going to adjourn for a 10-minute comfort break. Can everybody be back in their seats on time? Thank you.
Ceremonial Mayor of the City of Salford, Councillor Anne-Marie Humphreys.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Item 13, statement of the elected City Mayor. Can I ask the City Mayor to present his statement to the Council, please?
Okay, good morning everyone. First of all, welcome to the pupils from Binos Israel School in Kurzel. Really great to have you with us today, observing democracy in action in your city of Salford. It's an honour and a privilege to have you with us at the start of the new year. Chair and members of the Council, welcome to our first Council meeting of 2023. I trust that all of you have taken some well-deserved time off to reflect, to recharge, and to rally yourselves for the year ahead. Before I begin, I would like to pay my respects to the recently deceased Salford resident, former councillor and Labour Party member John Davis, who many in this council chamber will have known very well. John was a lifelong Labour activist and highly attuned to the goings on in this city council. He was intermittently the councillor for Walkden South Ward, winning elections in 1983, 1986, 1991 and 1995, and then served as the treasurer for the Worsley and Eccles constituency Labour Party until his sad death. John's contributions to Salford will not be quickly forgotten, and I'd like to extend my condolences to his family and friends and all of you who knew John at this time. As we step forward into a brighter new year, I think it's important to reflect that the past few years have been very challenging for both us in Salford, but also the country. Continued government austerity since 2010 has had an enormous impact across the whole swathe of British society. Many areas which are almost now unrecognisable from what came before. The past 10 years have seen this country open more food banks than we have branches of McDonald's, has seen public sector pay fall in real terms by 20%, and life expectancy stall from 2011 going into reverse through the COVID-19 pandemic. Our social infrastructure, our libraries, leisure centres, high streets, youth services have been devastated by these cuts. The UK has a lower social mobility than any country currently within the European Union. And these trends are set to worsen in the new year, with the Office of Budget Responsibility estimating recession and a contraction of our economy by 1.4% in 2023. From these poor fundamentals, the impacts of a bungled Brexit deal, the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine war have hit Britain particularly hard amongst Western nations. Our forecasted recession is estimated to be the longest and deepest in the G7, and we are not forecast to return to pre-pandemic levels of GDP until 2024. The OBR estimates that real wages will only reach 2008 levels again by 2027. In further emphasising these troubles over the Christmas holidays, I've been studying the government's provisional local government finance settlement and preparing this City Council's submission to the consultation that happens. As it stands currently, the City Council is still facing an over £5 million shortfall in our budget for 2023, much of which has been caused by cost inflation and unfunded budget pressures. With these challenges in mind, it's been hard, if not impossible, to once again be struck by the strangeness, if you like, of government priorities in the face of the cost of living crisis, and councils up and down the country on the brink of bankruptcy. Also notable is the continued manipulations of methodologies and funding pots which skew more and more money into wealthy areas in the south and southeast of the country, and away from post-industrial towns and cities like Salford. Since 2015, the staple of local government funding, the Revenue Support Grant, has been reduced nationally from 15.2 billion to 2.3 billion. Much of this money has been removed entirely from the Treasury's balance sheets year on year, with core funding dropping by a total of 49.5%, hiking all of this onto local council taxpayers. However, other parts of it have simply been repurposed to new funding pots and initiatives not targeted towards need or service demand, let alone levelling up, but on local authorities hitting targets set by national government. The long and short of this jiggery-pokery in Salford is an annual services budget which is £240 million less than it was in 2010. That is over a 50% cut. That's £240 million per year less to spend on services for the people of our city and in wages to staff who usually live local and contribute to our local economy. This year's settlement is a continuation, if you like, on a theme. Government priorities continue to be the skewing of formula to benefit primarily Conservative-held authorities in the south of England, to the detriment of the rest of us. This year, government is proposing to spend £153 million in funding towards the elimination of the negative revenue support grant. This is contributions towards allocations of the RSG from wealthy local authorities who raise above a certain threshold in council tax and business rates. This is £153 million in funding destined solely for authorities that need this money the least. The settlement also announces the top slicing of grants from the lower tier services grant and new homes bonus, providing £136 million towards a new funding guarantee, again which will inevitably benefit wealthier authorities, and an 85 million allocation for the new Rural Services Delivery Grant, a grant to combat the completely unevidenced and additional costs incurred by rural shire councils in delivering services. When I say unevidenced, I'm not exaggerating. Experts have continuously sought rationale from government as to why exactly rural sparsity is seen as a significant cost driver to local authorities, and to this day no statistical evidence has been provided. Furthermore, sparsity is a category already incorporated into the Revenue Support Grant formula. This grant is effectively an additional compensation for this unevidenced category, which conveniently targets itself towards Tory-held shire councils. Call me cynical, but when we have evidence from the top, this is happening. During his failed leadership campaign against Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak boasted of his record to a Conservative activist meeting in leafy Tunbridge Wells, where he said, and I quote, "I managed to start to change the funding formulas to make sure areas like this being Tunbridge Wells, are getting the funding they deserved. We inherited a bunch of formulas from Labour that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that." Now, our Prime Minister. In addition to these changes, the new funding settlement still has no recurrent funding solutions for social care and the crisis we're facing. And once again, we're suggesting hiking the adult social care precept by 2%, forcing this bill onto local council taxpayers. Now, Salford is outperforming many of our peers in managing ever-declining budgets year on year. Here, we didn't just save our libraries, we opened 7 new ones. We've refused to accept cuts meekly, capitalising our budgets, making sound investments into local infrastructure, bolstering our business rate base, and mitigating the impacts of national economic mismanagement to protect Salford residents from the worst impacts of the cuts. But all of us have our limitations, and tomorrow we'll be engaged in further budget setting and a deciphering of the provisional local government finance settlement to inform our announcements for the next financial year in due course. But the settlement itself illuminates the government's general attitude, if you like, towards the management of our economy and its priorities. This week, Cabinet member Nazim Zahawi has made arrangements to pay back millions of pounds to HMRC for seemingly tax evasion. An unscrupulous act which appears to typify the current disdain our government has for the rules which govern the majority of decent working people in our country. In 1987, under the government of Margaret Thatcher, champion jockey Lester Piggott was jailed for 3 years following evidence of tax fraud to the tune of £3 million. Just one element of tax evasion committed by Mr Zahawi is believed to be the use of his family trust, Bolshaw Investments, to cover him against up to £7 million of capital gains tax. This gentleman was once the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Yet who today is expecting to see Mr Zahawi face jail time, or even censure from the Conservative Party? Our public standards in office have sunk to historic lows under this present government, and it is difficult to understand how those standards can be rejuvenated without a general election. And to add to this maelstrom is the present crisis in the NHS, an avoidable farce of epic proportions, which is emblematic of government's contempt for the country's most beloved institution. The NHS spending has increased by an average of 3.7% every year since its creation, driven by the costs of modern treatments, inflation, and an ageing population. Broadly, Treasury spending on health services has mitigated for these costs. However, between 2010 and 19, funding increases for the NHS slowed to just 1.4% a year. Last year's award of £3.3 billion cash boost was heralded by the government as a huge leap, but in fact it fell short of the £4 billion required to simply cover the costs of inflation in that year alone. In addition to funding shortfalls, government has driven a pending crisis in health, overseeing drastic reductions in the number of beds, causing chronic bed blocking, which is paralysing our hospitals, capping the numbers of doctors and nurses who can be trained each year well below the necessary replacement levels. The UK has one of the lowest numbers of doctors per 1,000 people, not just in advanced economies, not just within Europe, but across the entire world, with an average of just 2.8 doctors per 1,000 people. By contrast, Austria has 5.1. And whilst understaffing and under-resourcing of hospitals, government has also overseen a huge drive to reduce the real-term pay of staff. Staff in healthcare have seen the largest reduction in real terms pay across the public sector. The real term pay of nurses is down £4,300 since 2010. Porters also have seen a reduction of £1,300 in real terms since 2010. Paramedics, real pay is down at a gigantic £5,600 since 2010. And just the other week I did visit the picket line for Salford ambulance staff in Eccles, and I spoke to strikers who were desperate not to see their real-term income drop once again after decades of pain in the midst of the cost of living crisis. These are trained professionals, heavily invested in their profession, with 3 or more years of training and development, and large debts often associated with that training and development. Now considering changing careers for more money with less responsibility elsewhere. It is truly a scandal. And all these factors make government's recently proposed minimum standards legislation all the more disgraceful. Under the new legislation, unions can be sued and their members sacked for refusing to adhere to minimum levels services dictated by the relevant cabinet secretary. The new powers reach across transport, health, fire service, education and border services, and would effectively remove the right to strike for millions of British workers. Government claims that is legislation which has equivalents in other European nations, but this is a lie. No other minimum service legislation has the terms set arbitrarily by the Secretary of State. No other minimum service legislation allows for individual employees to be sacked for being in breach of it. More importantly, no other minimum service legislation is backed up by the UK's Trade Union Act, which already places huge burdens in the way of unions successfully balloting for strike action, insisting on paper ballots, demanding a 50% turnout, a 4-week ballot process, and 2 weeks' notice of any given action. And that's not even to mention the government's dubious concern here over minimum standards. Where was the government's concern as A&E waiting times and targets have collapsed? Where was the strike action? Where has the concern been as patients have been lining our corridors on trolleys and sleeping on floors for the lack of beds and available doctors? Where was the government's concern for minimum service levels in our understaffed schools, where teachers teach classrooms of 40 plus students? And on Monday, 52% of our TransPennine Express trains were cancelled with no strikes. Where is the government's concern for minimum staffing levels there? Following years of austerity and privatisation, Britain's infrastructure is crumbling. Our public services are at breaking point. You cannot seriously turn to me and say government are motivated by providing minimum service levels to the British public. The reality is that government don't care about service levels available to the public or public safety. They care about preventing public sector workers from demanding a fair share of the pie, taking away from their cronies, the hedge fund managers, international investors, executives in organisations and multinational corporations that constitute the super rich of our country. This legislation is class war, waged by the super rich against the country's working people, in a race to the bottom which sees our economy providing bargain basement jobs which don't provide a decent crust, whilst creating opportunities for a small few to get fat from the proceeds of their work, if at all we can call it work. The Tory party are ultimately the vehicle to stuff their faces in the trough. This is the kind of legislation passed by dictators in banana republics or tin pot regimes, not modern democratic governments. It's an attempt to bully this country's working class into submission, combined with new powers for the police to arrest protesters and crack down on protests. It is part of a genuine assault on civil liberties, which every freedom-loving British person should be concerned about. Without strikes, we would never have abolished child labour in this country. We would never have won the right for working people to vote. We would never have won a 2-day weekend or put limits on the length of a working week. This life of a working person in this country used to be brutal, and it used to be also short, working 60 to 80 hours a week on a factory floor, living in squalor and often dropping dead before they reached 50 years of age. It's a past our government seemed determined to return to. This is not a vision for our future which I can abide by. This is not what we're going to sit down and accept here in Salford. Here, this council will continue to find innovative and inventive ways to invest and grow our city, provide our services, grow our local economy, despite the continuous bombardment we face from government of our finances. We're committed to growing the City Council's contribution to service provision and economic growth, not shrinking it, combining sensible investments with the clever reform and transformation of service provision. We are avoiding the financial bear trap set by the government and continuing to provide for the people of our city. This is my priority as the elected mayor of this city, and this is Salford Labour's promise to this city as the ruling party. Thank you very much.
Thank you, City Mayor. Just moving on to item 14, questions and comments to the elected city mayors. We've not received any questions with notice by the deadline of 9:30 last Monday. Can I now invite Councillor Robin Garrido as leader of the Conservative Opposition Group to respond to the city mayor's statement? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I first of all start by thanking the City Mayor for agreeing to the Leader of the Opposition, I myself, to have a little more time to respond in future to his fairly extensive statements. I will try not to take all of that time up, but to concentrate on what I regard as important issues. Before I start, first of all, can I wish everybody a Happy New Year? This is the first time I've seen a lot of you since Christmas, and I hope that it's certainly a healthy one compared to our previous 2 years. And can I also welcome the young ladies sitting in the balcony, and I hope you enjoyed the proceedings so far today. I'm not sure enjoying is not the right word. Sorry. Can I join with the City Mayor in speaking about John Davis? I too have known John Davis for many years. He's a local person in my area, and we've had many good conversations, both when he was on the council and in fact even since, when we bump into each other, walking around the area, when he takes his grandchild to school at Bridgewater, and so on. He was an active person and a person that thought deeply about the community in which he served. We really need more of that type of person, I hope, in our party. But we will miss people like John Davis, and our condolences certainly are with his family and friends and his former colleagues. Now, what is different today about the City Mayor's statement from the one he made at the last council meeting? Well, you'll not be surprised to know that almost absolutely nothing, because we hear the same attacks on the government week in and week out. We must start looking ahead, not constantly looking back. 1 minute, I think I counted, that the City Mayor spent on local matters. The rest of his statement was spent on national issues. Perhaps he's got his eye on other heights. Anyway, the City Mayor talked about £5 million shortfall. In fact, it was only a week or so ago that we were talking about a £15 million shortfall. Thanks to both our Treasurer, but also to the government for actually helping to get that 15 million down to 5 million. And I'm quite sure with a little more work, we may well be able to resolve that. But we'll be talking more about that, obviously, at the Budget Council. But can we remember that the government has given a considerable amount of finance over the year for specific items, and certainly as far as the North is concerned, quite apart from the stories that the City Mayor likes to tell about the South, we have done more to level up this government in the North than any previous government has done, and I'm quite sure they will continue to do that. What I have to say, in fact, is we want more spending on local issues and not more spending on tin-pot ideas. But I think it's also right that we welcome the efficiencies that the council has made over the last few years, and I would certainly like to thank our staff throughout the council, whether it be our cleaners or higher grade staff. We recognise the work that they have done, and we recognise the efficiencies that they have helped to achieve to make this council more efficient and to help us survive in what has been a difficult time and will probably continue to be a difficult time for a little while. The City Mayor referred to the current strikes by the unions, which, in my opinion, are threatening to paralyse our country. And what we have to recognise, in fact, is that very often these strikes are called by a minority vote. they're caused with less than 50%. They are caused by, I'm sorry, this is a fact, they are caused by less than 50% of members voting. I'm sorry, that is the case.
Quiet in the chamber,
and I
please.
think when the city mayor talked about it being disgraceful that the government should be talking about having more than 50% votes, I think that actually says it all. But can I tell you this? I'm not going to be led into the trap this morning of telling you how much worse it would be of the Labour government. Instead, I want to talk about what matters. I want to talk about what we would do and what we think needs to be done in this country. So I'm not going to stray from local matters. I'm not going to start talking about government matters. I don't want to become an MP or Prime Minister. I want to work in Salford. I want to work in Salford. I want to work in Salford for the benefit of the community. Now, let's start with the rugby stadium. Instead of receiving millions of pounds in capital receipts from the sale of our share of the stadium, we owned 50% of it, with Peel owning the other 50% of it, at the cost to the taxpayer of millions of pounds. I cannot give you precise figures because I'm not privy to these figures, but if you add up the rumoured figures, we will not be receiving from the sale, to the cost of buying the remaining 50%, which I know the city mayor is talking about, then we're talking of huge sums of money to keep a stadium going which has never yet paid its way. Now this is all because the city mayor, and I agree that he did this, during the election campaign he supported keeping the stadium. But there comes a time when you have to say that may have been the wrong decision. There comes a time when you have to say Salford cannot continue to keep supporting the stadium, and we really need the money that we have invested in that stadium to spend on the city. We were told, or I'm told by the city mayor, that the benefits to the community are well worth the money we are paying as a city. Well, I would like to ask people in all parts of the city to let us know what they think they'd be receiving in benefits, because I think, in fact, you would get very few positive replies. It's not even called the community stadium anymore. When we first set out, this was supposed to be the community stadium. In fact, I think we even had community stadium actually written on the outside of the building. That's all gone now. There's no mention of it being a community stadium. Surely it would be better if we had this sort of money to play with, to spend on improving or providing local sports facilities for our city, provide more facilities for our youth, which are sadly lacking, improve our libraries, which are also good meeting places, so they're not available for just 2 or 3 days a week. But the sad fact is, we do not have the money. In fact, the city mayor is always telling us that we need more money from government. So this spending on the stadium would need to be borrowed, added to the already astronomical high borrowings of over £230 million that we already owe, that we've already borrowed. And yes, I'm afraid you did hear right, over £230 million of borrowing that we are, of loans that we're committed to. If we sold our share in the stadium, look what we could do to help those people in our city who are struggling with the cost of living, particularly the high cost of fuel. We have people in our city today, as I am talking to you, who are scared to even turn their heating on. Let's sell the stadium. Let's sell our share in the stadium. Let's take the money from the sale to help our people who are struggling at this difficult time. Well, what else could we also be spending any windfall for selling the stadium? Back last May, and it's not that long ago, I spoke about bringing the pride back into our city. Briefly, this would entail keeping our streets and roads clear of litter, removing all fly tipping within 24 hours, filling all potholes within 28 days of appearing, enforcing local traffic regulations regarding particular illegal parking, trimming back overgrown areas, removing weeds and cutting grass, repainting street furniture, economic removal of bulk household items to try and cut down on fly ticking, and of course at the same time keeping council tax at an affordable level. I do not see any improvements in these services, which are so important to our residents and their quality of life. And don't let the city mayor tell us, well, we haven't got the money, it's because of the government. This is about how you use your resources. This is about how you allocate your money. And we would certainly allocate the money that we have in a far better way on some of those items I've just mentioned. Across Salford, this city is being strangled by traffic congestion, and yet we are continuing to build houses where the congestion is worse, without any regard to providing important infrastructure. We've held meetings with Highways England, who when tackled about consulting local people and councillors about how to resolve these problems said, oh no, we don't consult until we've made up our minds about potential schemes. Well, so far, it's taken decades to come up with any scheme. And to be perfectly honest, it's probably going to take decades before they even come up with a scheme to resolve our huge problems in this city. What we need to do, and I will join with the city mayor to do this, I've mentioned this previously, let's hold meaningful and constructive talks with the government about pushing Salford further up to the to-do list as far as infrastructure is concerned. The city mayor referred a few minutes ago to me suggesting a delay when we were talking about the local plan. He said it's madness that we delay, and I agree that it is madness that we have had the delay of years upon years upon years. We are in this position because we have taken so long to produce a local plan. And if we had got our act together years ago, then this local plan could have been produced as a full plan, and it could have included everything which is important to local people. And I include, of course, in that the designation of land for building. Instead, we are relying on the places for everyone. And I have to say that I think so far I have been the only person from Salford, excluding officers of course, who has actually spoken at the public examination which is currently ongoing. I've spoken on 3 separate occasions so far, and I'm down to speak on another 2 or 3 occasions. I think it would have been important for members of this council. Sorry, I had turned this off, I apologise. I'll pay the fine. I think it would have been important, in fact, for this council to show how important they consider places for everyone to be, but at least turning up at the public inquiry. The council's now approved the local plan this morning. As I say, it is only half a plan. Admittedly, it's part 1 of a plan, so it is only half a plan. It doesn't include the designation of land, although we are told that there's no threat there, and I really hope that is the case.
Just to let you know, Councillor Garrido, sorry, you have 2 minutes left. You have 2 minutes left.
2 minutes, I suppose, for 12 minutes now? 30 minutes?
It's amazing, isn't it?
All right, sorry. Time goes when you're enjoying yourself, I don't know.
It's not like it's over, right?
Okay, can I say in fact that our concern as local people about not having already designated land for building is the fact that certainly one of the major developers in the area, we are told, is already preparing planning applications for 2 of our large green belt spaces. They're not waiting for places for everyone. They're already, I'm told, preparing planning applications. And in fact, as we speak now, today, there's a consultation going on by one of the major landowners in the area in Moosetown, and that's happening as we speak today. I'm not going to say any more about a clear air zone. I've already spoken about that. I'm sure there'll be other opportunities to speak. But I just really want to finish by talking about having a greener city, and I'll keep this very, very brief, Madam Mayor. It's not about charging motorists for driving in the city. It's about encouraging people to work towards the things that actually cut down our use of carbon and so on. It's about coming up with new ideas. It's about, and this has been suggested previously, I think, by Councillor Carrigan, suggested, if I'm not mistaken. I'll borrow her idea. About cutting down or having zero use of plastic within the city. This can be done. It's been done in Kenya, and if Kenya can do it, I'm sure the city of Salford can have a city free of the use of plastic. So I think it's important that we start to look at those sorts of things. Let's look about how we can benefit Salford. Let's not spend our time just talking about what the government's done wrong and what the city mayor would like the government to do. Let's talk about what we can do in Salford with the resources that we have got. We can only work within those resources. Let's talk about what we can do. Let's look at how we can improve our services, and we will certainly support anything that we can do to actually provide those resources as and when we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrido. I've got quite a number of people indicating to speak. Can we have Councillor Brabiner first, please?
Is it on? Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. City Mayor, I want to add to your comments about food banks. Everyone knows it's shameful we have them. We're a rich country, yet people are going hungry. In my Broughton ward, as Councillor Mary will back up, we have Reverend Christine Threlfall and her volunteers at St James's Church, Higher Broughton, providing free lunches, no questions asked because of possible stigma. Huge thanks to her and to other volunteers throughout our city, because otherwise, due to government policies, they'd starve. And I'm proud to stand on the ambulance picket line with you and fellow Labour councillors that were there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brabner. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to say that I thought the speech and the statement from the City Mayor was excellent. However, I've got a couple of things to add. The theme was the callousness of the Conservative government and how they protect the rich or super rich. Two more things. What about energy prices? Now, as far as I'm aware, the wholesale price of gas is going down. But are the government going to help people more? The answer is no. In fact, they say that the average price is going up from 2,500 to 3,000 in April for the average bill. So, and also, I believe they're reducing the help that they've been giving to businesses. So again, that's another example to add to the long list that the City Mayor has mentioned. I'd also like to add about the WASPy women. The WASPy women, I include myself in this, are women that are born in the 50s and very early 60s. We're all expecting our pension at 60. Well, I passed that age by 3 years this week, unfortunately. And have I got my pension? No, I've got another 3 years to wait. Now, many of us the state pension will provide a big bulk of what we're going to get in retirement. To some of the Tories, it's not like that at all. They've got their savings, they don't need the state pension, but many working women and ordinary women have now got to work to 66 or 67, whether they like it or not, whether they're physically capable or not. Will the government help them? The answer is no. And finally, of course, I have to have a few words too. So, my words are this. I agree with you that the City Mayor does mention the government a lot. He really does. However, surely it's the actions of the government that impact on people in Salford, and that's the correlation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Kelly, please.
Thanks. I'd just like to thank City Mayor for the positives about the trade unions and the work that they do. Coming back to Councillor Greedo, I can assure you, being a member of 2 trade unions and 16 days of strike action, nobody takes striking lightly. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our members. They are not striking all about money, as the government seems to think it is. We're striking for terms and conditions of workers' rights that have been fought for over 100 years. We're also fighting for health and safety reasons. So if you maybe want to go and talk to many of those union members on the picket lines and talk to them and find out why they're striking, we're not trying to cripple this country. We're trying to make things better. And maybe a good read for you, Councillor Greedo, and others, if you've not already read it, is The Ragged Trouser Philanthropist. We're not going back 100 years. We're trying to improve things, not go back. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Rowland, please.
Thanks, Chair. Following the storms and heavy rainfall, I wanted to thank the work of the key workers in the quays who worked to keep the area and the waterways and get rid of all the litter and keep the waterways clear. These workers have been going out in freezing weather to clean up our community, and I think they must be commended for their efforts in what are quite trying circumstances in the last couple of weeks and the last couple of months. Does he agree with me that it's very disappointing to see our Lib Dem colleagues, particularly Councillor Alex Warren, slagging off these quays workers and saying that they're not working hard enough and saying that they're not going out long enough, particularly when it's been his party, along with the Tories, who cut off our budget, making it incredibly difficult for us to do that more. And I believe that he was actually intending to come to this meeting and to attack our key workers for what they're doing. But he couldn't be bothered to turn up along with his other Lib Dem colleague. And I think that really says a lot, you know, that our key workers go out in cold weather, but he can't be bothered to turn up. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland. Councillor Keeley, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before I start what I'd actually written down to say, I just want to come back on a few things about what the Mayor said about the NHS. It's a very simple fact. If you're in Wales, don't get sick. The NHS in Wales has been run by the Labour Party since 1999. And may I remind Councillor Rowland that actually in coalition with the Liberal Democrats as well for a number of years, as well as the Nationalists and everyone who wants to separate the country, over 50,000 people are waiting on an NHS waiting list for more than 2 years in Wales. In England, it's only a few hundred. I can tell you that over 50%, 60%, sorry, of 999 calls, they are not met within the target. They are supposed to be there within 8 minutes. They are not met. 220 avoidable deaths in England is 258 in Wales. And just to sum it up, 1 in 4 people are on a waiting list in NHS in Wales. And of course, no doubt you'll come back and say it's all down to government cuts, but actually for every £1 that people in England receive spent on them is £1.25 in Wales, so I don't think that argument's going to cut it. So basically, if you want to know what the NHS under Labour looks like, go to Wales. Beautiful country, terrible at football, but a wonderful country. But I wanted to, so I just wanted to come back on that comment very quickly. But what I was going to say actually is, following on from what Councillor Garrido was talking about traffic, I wanted to raise a conversation that I had actually on Sunday with a pastor, Mr. Mayor. He informed me that on the first week of the year, he'd been involved in a car crash, unfortunately, and out of the 93,000 square miles he could possibly crash, it happened on the slip road to Worsley roundabout. This is not the first time, it's one of many, and to be honest, I get the point where it just seems that the council just doesn't really care about congestion anymore, because as Worsley roundabout is suffering, there's a roundabout that seems to be doing the rounds, and I was sent this on TikTok, not that I subscribe to that bilge, but I was sent a video on TikTok of the new roundabout for cyclists down in the Keys. Safety fears raised over cycling roundabout, hailed as the first of its kind in the UK. I think it was one of the headlines. It's first of its kind, not really for a good reason, I must say. Less sense, more money. I'm actually concerned that the mockery that your council is making of traffic and congestion in Salford is an absolute joke, and it shows where the priorities are lie. And now I did ask how much it cost. And obviously I know it's part of the £22 million total upgrade that they've had in that area. I know that wasn't the specific cost for that. I was told
you can be assured that the costs at the location pictured in the press are a small portion of the overall project. However, I don't believe the costs will have been quantified separately for the roundabout. So basically, we don't know how much it is, but it probably wasn't too much. Now, decades of congestion has been a problem in Worsley, but not just Worsley, in Walkden, in Swinton, in Boottown, decades and decades and decades and decades. And now we're being told to take public transport and take advantage of Burnham's buses, or maybe grab a train, that's if they're running, of course. And the expectation to just stop driving and take up public transport is an alternative that really wouldn't logically work at the moment. And it's something that I will be taking to your beloved places for Nobody Plan examination next month as they try and develop inappropriately in the area. Now, roundabouts for cyclists is not the type of investment Salford needs. It's been absolutely ridiculed, and that's because it's a ridiculous idea. We need to get on with fixing the roundabouts and junctions. We've had problems for a long time. And we were promised a trial in Worsley. We had a meeting about a trial in Worsley, but for traffic control, that is. But lo and behold, it was delayed. Well, why was it delayed? Because of a traffic collision to the electricity supply. That's right, another traffic collision in Worsley has prevented a traffic light trial in that area. And it's making an absolute mockery that we've still not been able to sort this out for far too long. People contact me so much, contact Councillor Robin and Councillor Karen about this issue, and our colleagues across the area, and it really grinds my gears when nothing can be done. So, Mr. Mayor, obviously, I know you'll have known of this issue because we've raised it many times. I'd just like you to ask, I'd like you to answer, which is worse? Is it the roundabout for cyclists or the roundabout in Worsley?
Thank you, Councillor Keeley. Councillor Warmisham, please.
Well, members know that I don't usually get up unless it's worth saying something, so I want to talk about local issues. Like Councillor Brabner, I'm absolutely appalled that in Salford we have to have food banks. We have to have places where people can go in to get warm. We have to have organisations like Loaves and Fishes, like Emmaus. It's absolutely scandalous. And it concerns me that I've got my constituents phoning me who are working people and can't afford to pay the rent, pay the mortgage, pay for the heating. It's just absolutely scandalous. And those also, we have the people in Salford that have to choose between eating or heating. It's just unacceptable. And that is a local issue caused by this Conservative government. I also feel that this government is forcing Salford children into poverty because of their policies. And again, that is an absolute scandal in a country as rich as ours. And I've got to say, it went down
Don't shout across the chamber.
And I've got to say, is over the last decade, this government has ruined this country and its infrastructure, and it has been the working people and the vulnerable that have suffered the most. I would ask our Tory councillors to actually examine their consciences, because all I've heard for this last 10 years is them propping up and supporting and making excuses for this government while the people in Salford suffer because of it.
Thank you, Councillor Warmisham. Councillor Sharp, please.
Thank you, Chair. I too, like City Mayor, I'd like to pay tribute to John Davis. For those that, well, I think everyone knows John Davis, but locally in our side of the city, John Davis is known as a leader. He's a leader, mentor and a friend. The amount of work he's done for councillors and residents in our side of the city is absolutely phenomenal. And he's the person that's made Walkden, Little Hulton and Worsley and that area the places they are today. He's a master tactician, historian and teacher, and what he doesn't know is probably not worth knowing. All too often we have meetings with John and he'll take you back to the 1960s and even before of how things used to be, and the springboard and the journey we've come. We have long conversations with him, and he's been absolutely phenomenal. And condolences to Josephine and his family members who have been very supportive of myself, actually. And even when campaigning, they've looked after the kids so I could get out and leaflet. The tribute that they've given is absolutely fantastic. I'd just like to get onto politics and a few of the comments, some that I'm not too keen on, to be honest. So the first one is one that Councillor Greedo said. He said, if Kenya can do it, why can't Salford? I mean, to me, that smacks of the rhetoric that we should be saying nowadays. If Kenya, in effect, a second-place country, a third-world country can do it, why can Salford not do it? That sort of rhetoric, and although it's loose language, we need to clean up on our language and make sure that that kind of wording isn't mentioned, because we shouldn't be saying Kenya can do it, why can't Salford? Well, I mean, if you want a point of explanation, I'm happy to hold for you while you explain that one. No, I just find that inflammatory and kind of not the right wording at all. We talk about congestion charge and traffic, and I think one of the biggest things for our side of the city that we've had is the guided busway. The guided busway is absolutely phenomenal for residents of Lee, Boothstown, Ellenbrook, Wharton. If you can get on it, that's the point. Thank you for raising that. If you can get on it. And I think the issue that we have with guided busways is a Conservative-led, strong opposition to that route that limited what the busway could do. If it wasn't for Councillor Greedo leading that campaign, then the guided busway would be twice as good as it is today. So when he talks about, in this chamber, when he stands up and talks about the council don't do enough to limit traffic and congestion in the city, every time we put forward a credible point and a credible project to reduce traffic, he is the first one to stand up and say, this is a white elephant. And you can look at the public records, it's all there. The amount of times he's slagged off all the projects we have to reduce congestion is unbelievable. And we come to Councillor Keeley. Councillor Keeley mentions that Worsley Roundabout's an issue, and I agree with Councillor Keeley, but it took a councillor as myself from Little Hulton to bring in the issues of congestion around Worsley, doing his job for him to the scrutiny panel so that we could have a discussion with Highways England. We brought in Highways England to our scrutiny panel so we could talk about the traffic congestions around the M60, M602 and M62 and Worsley Roundabout.
What's your point of information, Councillor Greedo?
I've got to disagree. I have records on the emails.
Councillor Sharp, sorry. Can you modify your language, please?
Apologies, Chair. I have it on
some order
record.
in the chamber. Carry on, please.
Yeah, I have it on record. I have the emails to back it up that I was the one that forwarded this. I was the one in the Growth and Prosperity panels that said we need to address this, and I brought it forwards to the Growth and Prosperity panel. And even your own members, Councillor Ward, he'll probably say the same as well. It was me that brought it up in that panel. At the meeting, we had Highways England sit there and say, I don't really know. We have thought about doing some projects, but we've not really done anything about it. For years this has been an issue, and for them to come to our panel and say they're not doing anything about it is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. So, I mean, the hope is that we did join together on this, and it is a joint effort by both Labour and Conservatives, so we need to address the problems of the highway network. That's the real issue, because once we solve them, then we can look about getting the roundabout sorted. They need to come forward first, so there's no point in sitting here slagging off roundabouts. The wider network needs to be solved, and we need to work together on that. I've got a few more. Last point on strike action. I just think it's the hypocrisy with thank you, Conservative leaders and in general that a few years ago we clapped key workers, we clapped these railway strikers and said what a fantastic job they're doing. These are the heroes. And now today they're striking because the terms and conditions are being eroded. The pay's not gone up for so long, and now the super villains, from going from superhero to super villain in a couple of years, I just don't know what's going on with society, and
the media that's backing this, it's just disappointing, quite frankly.
You've gone over now, thank you, Councillor Sharp. Thanks, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Pevitz, please.
Yeah, good morning. Just a few pointers about what Councillor Garrido said. One of them was the rumoured amount of spending. Well, it's really great to make an assumption what's been spent on a rumour. You know, it's like your gas thingy, approximation. How much gas you use? This all based on last year's average, what we thought you used, what you thought you used. No, so you need figures. But back to school spending, it's still not reached 2010 levels yet. It's been cut so much. This year's pay rise is rising 5%, which is a third of the RPI inflation rate, which RPI includes your housing costs, which is quite a big thing, not including the CPI. So this pay rise of 5% was not fully funded by the government, sorry. So the schools have to fund the rest. How can schools raise money? There's not to sell. They can't open all the rooms up to bring in thousands of pounds that's been cut or needed for the pay rise. So the only way is by sacking teachers. So further increase the number of students and pupils in classes. So further diversifying the education for these young people in our city. And this then leads to more work for the teacher. Instead of a class of 8 or 9 at Eton, you've got a class of 38 or 39 in Salford. 38 or 39, lots of marking to do each time. So many young teachers and graduates go into profession. The last 2 or 3 years, they're totally burnt out doing 60 hours a week. Majority of it unpaid, really. If we actually divided the number of hours done by the pay, they're actually getting below the minimum wage, which is illegal. But teachers don't do that. They don't do it for the money. But the mental health of teachers does mean they have to leave. They can't carry on. And currently the government are on their 5th year of not reaching their targets for trainee teachers. And we're not getting graduates coming into profession. We're not getting the good people who can teach in maths. 1 in 8 maths teachers have not got a degree in mathematics. That's going to get worse. And with less graduates coming into teaching, we're not reaching current targets. The situation gets worse and worse each year. And we've seen these results for IMATs. Students, the poor people, they're going to school, not eating in the morning. They're going wearing the same clothes. The problem having heating to have a wash as well. All of these impact on a young person's education. We have Maslow there. And the first thing on Maslow is safety, security. They're not getting that, our kids. All because of these government cuts. That's what I'm saying, we'll talk about pay rise if they don't fund it, it's no good. We then look at transport in this city. Mention the trains. More days have been lost to train service companies not running trains than has to striking days. There's a problem there, minimum service with them. We look at the bus service. So again, last night, it's supposed to be 4 buses, between 4 and 5 out of Bolton to A37. There was 1. They've not enough drivers. Now they're proposing to remove all bus services from April between Bolton and Salford. So how do all the people who work in Bolton who work in Salford, vice versa, going to get to work? Our train services aren't any good to rely on. So that's, again, government spending. And then I go back to how much this council owes. We have a debt of 230 million. How much has the government cut? 240 million. If I do a bit of maths on that, I reckon if the government wouldn't have cut that 240 million, it would have been 10 million in credit. No problem.
Thank you, Councillor Pevett. Councillor Wade, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I totally disagree with Councillor Garrido when he says...
I don't think your microphone is working.
Oh, it's red. It is on. Is it on? Go on. Carry on. I totally disagree with Councillor Garrido when he says that we shouldn't look back. I think we must look back because looking back informs the decisions that we make today and tomorrow. It informs all our choices, and it also ensures that we go forward because it stops us from going back. We should look back to make sure that we don't go back, and we don't want to go back to the kinds of conditions that the City Mayor described in his report, where working conditions and living conditions were so bad. I would now like to go back to 1834. I'd like to remind everybody that in that year a group of agricultural workers were arrested. They were charged with swearing an oath. They joined an organisation and swore an oath. Now, lots of organisations required an oath at that time. Freemasons, Oddfellows, lots more. But this group of workers were targeted because they'd had the temerity to join a trade union, and they'd begun to demand decent wages and decent working conditions. They were tried, convicted and deported to Australia, and these are the people that we now know as the Torquay Martyrs. So we must remember their struggle. 200 years on, of course, everybody knows that one of the most important things in a democratic society is to have free trade unions. And in our democratic society, we have the fundamental British freedom of the right to strike, a right that was hard won by our forebears, and we should never forget that. This minimum service legislation seeks to remove that right. It's undemocratic and it's unworkable. It's a draconian measure that would enable the government to turn back the clock on workers' rights, rights that were hard won by the trade union movement. These proposals would see NHS staff, education staff and other frontline workers, our key workers, criminalised for withdrawing their labour. A real denial of workers' rights. It would take this government from clapping key workers to sacking them. Happy to see workers on the front line living on the breadline. So we must oppose this legislation. After more than a decade of wage stagnation and in a cost of living crisis, we must stand with our trade union colleagues to demand decent pay and decent conditions at work. This is the only way that we will ensure that the issues of poverty and deprivation that we see across our city don't increase year on year. The two things go hand in hand. What happens in our city is often dominated by the legislation from the government. So we must stand with our trade union colleagues and make sure that we don't go back to the way things were 200 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. Councillor Youd, please.
Thank you. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me. I'm only 5'11" and a half, so shouldn't be any troubles with the microphone. It's a great shame that our local Tories have taken to this bargain basement Britain approach, just as the national Tories have. The Tories, since being in government since 2010, have eroded public life in our country, and now the Tories are looking to do the same in our city. On almost every metric, life is getting worse, whether it's NHS waiting times, whether it's life expectancy stagnating, real wages falling, life is getting worse. Ordinary people are getting poorer, whilst those that fund the Tory party are getting richer. when people are taking a stand to try and improve this country, not just for themselves and for their families, but for the entire service, whether it's the NHS, the fire service, or our country's railways, the Tories' approach is to criminalise it. Where people want to improve things, they want to sack them. Where people want to make things better, they want to put them in prison. You know, that's the kind of Tory party that we have now. Allegedly, a Tory party that's patriotic and for one nation, and instead is grinding this country into the dust whilst it allows the billionaires to pick up the gold. Now, in America, there was a women's strike that asked for bread and roses. Now, workers always need bread, but we need roses as well. We need the good things in life. Now, in Salford, one of those good things that we have is rugby league. And that's part of our working class heritage. It's part of something that ties us as Salfordians, whether you're a Swinton Lions fan or a Salford Red Devils fan. Now, the Tories' approach is bargain Britain, get rid of everything that you enjoy, and everyone can just have the crumbs off the table. But in Salford, we're saying, no, people live to enjoy their lives, not just to exist, not just to make profit for Tory party donors. Now, Councillor Greedo said that he's not entirely sure on the finances, but it's well within his rights to ask for a briefing on it. It's not that difficult to do so. The land underneath the stadium is valued at £15 million. We're purchasing the other half of the stadium for £7 million. So even if you're looking at it from a hard-headed point of view and not just about supporting an institution that has been in this city for 150 years, it makes financial sense, in addition to the sale of land around the stadium to pay the debt. So what estimates at the moment is we should come out with surplus as a result of the stadium development. Now, you're talking about Salford Reds in the stadium not being a community institution. You've asked why it's not called the Salford Community Stadium anymore. Technically it is right now, but it's also because of naming rights. You know, this is something that's common amongst all stadiums, and we sell the naming rights to the stadium. Now, if Salford...
Councillor Guido, can you quiet please while member's speaking?
If that stadium doesn't provide any community value, why is it that the Salford Reds Foundation Trust has been able to deliver £6 million back into the community? Why is it that 50 young adults at the moment are in full-time education with the foundation? 68 schools are working with the foundation. 6,000 young people have been engaged in sporting activities with the foundation. They've set up a physical disability team. They've set up a learning disability team. They're setting up a wheelchair team. They've set up a veterans team. They've set up a women's team, and the women's team achieved promotion in the very first season that they played. Salford Reds has been in this city for 150 years, and last season they went into the semi-finals of the Super League. Prior to that, they were in the final, and prior to that, they were in the final of the Challenge Cup. Now, as a proud Salford Reds fan, I'm hoping that they win one of those finals, but everyone else, I think, in the city can see that the Salford Reds are rising, and it's such a shame that our Tories do not see that and would rather cast them out of the city and see such an institution and something so beloved in this city gone, and just to leave us with the crumbs. But we want roses too, and that includes rugby league.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Youd. Councillor Saunders, please.
Thanks, Chair. After my previous speech, I was tempted to quit while I was winning, but maybe I'm a sucker for punishment. Just on the stadium, firstly, I can tell you there are a lot of very disappointed people in my ward, be they local residents, be they the Salford City Football Club, who are led to believe that they were going to move into the stadium, and then without consultation, certainly no consultation to residents, there was a press announcement that it's all fallen through. So I just want to make that point. Unlike my colleague, Councillor Garrido, I do have ambitions to become an MP. I have been relisted for the Conservative Party for the next election. But like my colleague, I have no ambitions to become a PM. I think the tenure of a Prime Minister these days is probably shorter than the average football manager, so don't think that's something to aspire to. On a serious point, I just want to say one thing. The City Mayor, and I listened very carefully to his words, used the words, "I visited a picket line." Now that's a very clever terminology. Visited a picket line as if he was there for research purposes. Councillor Brabham and Councillor Kelly, I think, gave the game away when they expressed support for the pickets. So my question to the Mayor is, was he there visiting as a researcher for research purposes, etc., or was he there to lend support to people who, whatever the merit of their case, are causing utter misery to the working people of Salford and their children?
Right, can we have some order, please? Councillor Merry, thank you.
Thank you. Well, if you're talking about people causing misery to the people of Salford, I suggest that the current Prime Minister is causing infinitely more misery to the people of Salford than any picket line could possibly do, actually, and I would actually urge you to reflect on that. I think the second point, before I say that, by the way, I want to pay tribute to John Davis, who I asked to be my performance review chair when I was chair of the Education Committee, because I wanted somebody who had a reputation for asking awkward questions and for not taking no for an answer. And I think we'd all agree, that those of us who knew him, that that was a sort of streak that he had throughout his life, and I think it's a tragedy that he's gone. He provided great service to the city. But the second point I wanted to make is I'm taking no lectures from the Tory party on democracy, quite frankly. This is a party who has given us 3 prime ministers in 12 months, and in fact has changed the rules to stop its own voters having a say in who the Prime Minister is, let alone agreeing to a general election, right? They changed the rules following the disaster of Liz Truss, so that actually Tory supporters would not get a vote on who the next Prime Minister would be, because they deliberately changed the numbers inside the parliamentary party to avoid a vote taken.
Sorry to interrupt you. What's your point of information?
The information, Chair, is that is not the case. There were minor rule changes about how many people were needed, with the support of how many MPs there were needed, but the simple reason why members did not get a vote was simply because there was only one candidate left standing after the MPs voted. There was no change, and there's certainly no change for the future. Thanks, Chair.
Well, I'm sorry. I think a member of the Russian Politburo would do rather better as an answer than that particular one, because what you're saying is, oh, we changed the rules so that there could only be one nomination, actually, and therefore members were not required to take part in the vote. I suspect that an awful lot of people inside the Conservative Party feel that the rules were changed to prevent Boris Johnson coming back, actually. That's the real reason why the rules were changed. And the fact is that you denied your members a vote when you were arguing that trade unions are denying their members a vote. Exactly the contrary, I'm afraid. And you should actually take lessons from the trade union movement on democracy and perhaps apply it to your own party. The fact remains, and I would urge you to reflect on this. If we take the Royal College of Nursing, for years, forever, they have never had an industrial dispute with the government. How have you, as a party, got into this, got into a situation where you're attacking nurses who want to do their best for their patients for their trade union activity? And I'm grateful for the reminder that we had about the Tolpuddle martyrs, actually, because there is a reality behind that which people may not be aware of. Those people were transported to Australia not because ostensibly they were trade union activists, but because they allegedly broke the law over oath-taking, a law that was designed to stop Jacobins, right, in this country, a law that was supposedly not targeted at trade unions, but was deliberately used by the British working class to attack people trying to exercise a democratic right. If I might be rather more sympathetic to your issues on trade union democracy, if you would agree to grant the British people the basic right that they should have, which is to have a general election. That would resolve the issue, but you're not prepared to do it. I'll tell you why you're not prepared to do it. It's because you're 20 points behind in the opinion polls as things stand at the moment. You are losing Tory seat after Tory seat in local government by-elections up and down the country. Right, sorry, go on. You're going to tell me you're not 20 points behind.
Councillor explanation needs to be relevant.
On that point of information, Chair, it was actually only 3 years ago when the government asked for a general election that the Labour Party, in opposition, did not want it out of fear of a no-Brexit deal. It was also the Labour Party who have changed their own rules for a leadership election to prevent someone like Jeremy Corbyn ever getting re-elected again.
Well, I'm interested in this because your own leader, Councillor...
Sorry.
Right. Your own leader, Councillor Garrido, says we don't want to talk about the past. We only want to talk about the future. And yet, you have actually cited the Welsh government rather than the British government, and now are arguing that we should be talking about what happened 3 years ago rather than the reality of the disaster that you're now facing, actually, because you only have to look at the by-elections that have taken place up and down the country and see that the British people are rejecting your policies. That's what's actually happening, and you can't disguise it, and the sooner we have the general election, the better. I finally just want to address the point that Councillor Garrido made, if I may. The point that Councillor Garrido made is we don't want to talk about the Conservative government, because what we want to do is just talk about other issues. We don't want to mention the government. And yet, as was mentioned about the Worsley roundabout, it's the British government that organises the agency that refuses to allow us to make any changes about it. Now, I appreciate that Councillor Garrido thinks that we should spend our time tugging our forelock and saying thanks God for all the money that you give to Salford. I actually want to fight for the people of this city. I actually want to ensure that we get a fair share of the resources, not one that is handed out to us by the current government. And the only way we're going to do that is by what I'm afraid the City Mayor is doing day after day, which is pounding away at the government and about what they're trying to do to the people of this city. Join with us on that. Join with us in supporting our demands for fair funding, because sometimes I tease the Mayor by saying he spends far too much time talking about local government finance, but he's absolutely right to do that, because at the end of the day, it's an unfair formula funding that ensures that the people of this city do not get the resources they deserve, and that's exactly what you don't want to talk about. I support the people of this city. You actually rather would support your government, and I'm afraid I will make the choice to support the people of this city every time.
Thanks, Councillor Merrick. We've had a lot of people wanting to speak on this debate, and I didn't want to stifle it in any way. We've got 2 more speakers. Can you please be brief so we can get through the business? Thank you. So it's Councillor McCusker.
Yeah, it's just in response to the comments about the roundabout, the cycle roundabout. So the area in question needed construction regardless of which solution was used. The actual cost over and above any of the solution was 0. In fact, the central island was paved in bitmac, whereas more expensive Kellam paving would have had to have been used if we'd chosen an alternative form reform and therefore the construction of the roundabout reduced the cost for this part of the scheme and was the only solution which worked safely and set out in the set of constraints that we had in the location. That was it.
Thank you, Councillor McCusker. Councillor Lancaster, please.
I stand with some question mark of whether I really am entitled to, but I'm going to do it. As a director of the stadium company, I have to declare an interest. And the restrictions for us not being able to say things as directors is something which I would never have been accepted to be a director if I had known the consequences of having to keep mum of anything which is going on. As far as I'm concerned, make it clear, if you're going to make the case for the stadium, make the case. The stadium itself was making a profit up to the current recession, because it is a recession, which this government brought about in part. And let's be honest, a lot of business was actually turned away from the stadium because of the issues, of the health issues which we got took close on 2 years. We've got to emphasise also that we've actually paid interest on all the debts as a cost for the company to the council for the land and the money they've lent us. We actually paid close on 5% interest and the council borrowed the money at less than half that. So there's a substantial benefit. There's also has to be a recognition that the opposition in this council, even when I was an executive support member and I clearly had a situation that we had invited the opposition in to go through the detail which we're not supposed to disclose, but we did it in a confidential nature. Yesterday was close on 2 million, well it was 2 million paid into for one piece of the site. The completion was done yesterday. Another one was done with a deposit of a very large scheme, which I can't tell you the figure of it, but well, let's put it this way: it's close on 15 million. Made a deposit of £1 million off that compensation. Nobody's going to pay a deposit of £1 million unless they're going to complete. There is a lot of land which potentially is on the verge of actually completion of sales. We have to recognise that the stadium itself and the grounds which gone about, you wouldn't have had the contamination on that site dealt with if you hadn't have gone through the soil development which has taken place there. How else would you fund that derelict piece of land, which was derelict piece of land where it's on now, is close on a valuation of £30 million. So when the time comes, and I still have an open invitation, which we said to the opposition, if you want to see some of the trade fields which we're doing, then we're more than happy to declare it. What we can't do, we must actually expect the confidentiality of some of the information we've got. So I'm sorry to say this, but people, when you talk about lies and out lies, this is a lie as far as I'm concerned, because the stadium is in the profitable nature. My concern is that we're having to sell it anyway, because it's taken so long with the current climate of land sales to get development. One of the, which we can say this, one of the sites which is in question, we were criticised, we lost for £3 million of IKEA as a sale. That piece of land is nearly now going for more than double what we actually forecast for the site. So there is opportunities to actually, which Salford will show quite clearly when the time comes and when we're allowed to, will show quite clearly the business is a profitable one. And it wouldn't, I've got to say, if it hadn't been for the sort of things which the council took at that time, other developments wouldn't have taken place, the Keys wouldn't have happened, the Lowery would not have been built. We took risks, but the risk is paid off, and this will pay off. I'm confident.
Thank you, Councillor Lancaster. Bring in City Mayor. Thank you.
there are a few. Okay, we're going to start with Councillor Garrido. Happy New Year to you all. I've already said that. John Davis, I also associate myself, as you know, with the comments you made, and you associate yourself with mine, so thank you very much. I agree actually with Councillor Wade. You talk about not looking backwards. Well, we can kind of only look backwards, can't we, really, if we're serious about learning, pedagogy, and, you know, learning from some of our great masters, really, certainly in terms of the working class movement, which we've heard an awful lot about today. So looking back is absolutely critical to moving forward, as far as I'm concerned. And anyone who doesn't believe that, there's a degree, I would say, of arrogance, really. They're almost beyond learning from our history, and I find that somewhat intolerable. The point you keep making about focusing on the local rather than the national, well, I do have to remind colleagues that we probably live in one of the most centralised states in the Western world. The decisions made in Westminster and Whitehall have profound implications for councils up and down the country, for our communities, for our streets, for our residents. Not that I want it to be that way, and it seems government has clearly dispensed with the levelling up agenda, and what all of this means for the future of devolution, goodness only knows, because we've never really had full, meaningful devolution. Westminster and Whitehall continue to keep their claws into everything we're doing. And obviously we know the short-termism that often comes with this, which is a way of controlling what happens within councils up and down the country. You're right, Councillor Garrido, when we embarked on our budget, 16 million quid was what we were looking to find at the start of the financial year. And obviously we didn't know what the provisional local government finance settlement was going to turn out, and we didn't find that out until very, very recently. This is not how you do medium to long-term financial planning. It's absolute bonkers. And anything you can do to get government to give us more surety around what we're getting out of them much sooner would be really appreciated. You also talk about, you know, this being about driving efficiencies. Let's be clear, this is not efficiencies, this is cuts, this is people's jobs, this is services. Services to some of the most vulnerable people in our city. Now, I'm not here saying there aren't efficiencies to be made, but when we're talking about £240 million year on year being taken out of your revenue budget, I'm sorry, I cannot accept that is simply efficiencies. And the other thing that really upsets me when you talk about these things is you fail to acknowledge that for many, many years, Tory councils in the south and the southeast of the country have been benefiting from sweetheart deals, from transitional grant funding. I also told you about all the latest ones in the latest round of settlement from government. That allows them to keep council tax down. That allows them to have more money to employ people to deliver services. This has been going on for years. Think of the cumulative impact of all of that. You know, when we talk about levelling up, we need to level up local government financing, because Salford has lost money to look after the interests of Surrey. And that's the reality here, colleagues. And the fact that our Tory opposition are not interested in these issues is deeply concerning. And it's a disservice, actually, to the residents and the communities of our city. I don't agree with your comments about the trade unions and workers, certainly in the public sector as well, going on strike. I've never seen this level of strike activity in my lifetime. But from speaking with these public sector workers, they don't know what else they can actually do. They've tried to negotiate, they've tried to lobby and influence, they've tried to make representations. No one listens. The government want to sit down and not even talk about pay. I mean, this is how bonkers negotiations have got in 21st century Britain. But what I do know is these workers deeply care about our residents, our services, our communities, and the last thing they want to do is go on strike. And actually, in going on strike, they financially lose out. And let's not forget that. In addition to that, one of the things you don't mention, I was speaking with our ambulance workers the other day, they are actually still providing life and limb cover, even though they're on strike. So when you talk about the chaos that's ensuing off the back of this, again, I don't associate myself with those comments. You talked about the rugby stadium. Now, obviously you know one of the things I intend to do in the not too distant future is issue a strategic intent document that makes it very clear what this city council intends to do in the direction of travel with regards to all things the community stadium. But let's not forget, that was built as a community stadium. That was sold to the people of Salford as a community stadium. I think it's our job to ensure that it remains as a community stadium. And Councillor Youd articulated really well the historic importance of a 150-year-old club within our city, encouraging children and young people and adults alike to get involved in rugby. The health and well-being benefits of that, Councillor Keeley was only talking about in the other council, talking about where is our football strategy, where is our rugby strategy, what role does our community stadium play in all of this in terms of the health and well-being of our city. In terms of the point you make about what the stadium's called, I think the bottom line here is we receive money for calling it AJ Bell Stadium. And actually that helps with what Councillor Lancaster said in terms of the stadium company washing its face and turning a profit. Operationally, the stadium is delivering. Doesn't mean we can't do more, doesn't mean we shouldn't look at doing more. But you're absolutely right. The impact has been the recession and the COVID-19 pandemic more recently. But certainly, my understanding of the stadium is it's washing its face, if you discount, obviously, development finance and ongoing working capital. The other thing interestingly you do as well is you talk about money without differentiating between capital and revenue. Because if you sold the stadium, as soon as you've spent that money, it's gone. It's absolutely gone. And Councillor Youd reminded us, as socialists, we want our bread, but we also want our roses. And the stadium is one of our roses in the city. And we're going to look seriously at the next steps around all of that. And as I say, I will be issuing a strategic intent document with regards to what I intend to do. You then went on to talk about streets, potholes, litter, trimming back bulk items, keeping council tax at an affordable level, but you forgot to mention all the jiggery-pokery that's been going on with local government finance, sweetheart deals on social care, transition grant funding, rural services delivery grant, negative RSG, minimum cap on core spending power, which will benefit Tory councils in the south of the country and have a negative impact in Salford. You also forgot to mention that the government, in all of their calculations, is assuming that councils will increase council tax by 3%. So that's what government have assumed we will do. They're in a sense forcing us to do it, actually. And also on the adult social care precept, 2%. Again, forcing us to do it because they haven't come up with enough money to tackle the crisis. Local plan, I don't think I need to say anything more on that. I think it's absolutely scandalous that you voted against that today. That plan helps this city improve what we do on the delivery of affordable housing, tackling the homelessness and housing crisis we're facing, improving environmental standards, thinking about social value and impact in terms of creating jobs and opportunities for people, thinking about public realm and infrastructure and how developers contribute to that. And you've suggested we pause it and link it with PFE. This is madness. Pausing that will only cause more problems for our city, not less. And in terms of Salford being green, 60% of our city is green. We've done lots on walking and cycling, tree planting, parks, and interestingly, there is actually work being done on plastic within the city. If you go down to Media City and talk to many of the businesses there, there's a whole initiative in and around the quays to try and move plastic out of supply chains. Councillor Brabiner, food banks, I totally agree. It's scandalous what's going on in this country. And, you know, it is thanks to community voluntary and social enterprise and faith-based organisations in the city that we are able to support our residents and communities. It's no thanks to the Tory government and the cuts and making us feel like Oliver time and time again, coming back for more as though, you know, we're spending our money unwisely or wrongly. We've not got enough money to spend. But I do acknowledge the work that they do in our city. And like you, I was proud to stand on the ambulance service picket line, along with yourself and other colleagues as well in this chamber. And I was there in solidarity, Councillor Saunders. I wasn't there as a researcher. I mean, I don't know why on earth you thought this, but I'm a socialist, Councillor Saunders. Public sector workers, frontline workers, the workers we clapped during the COVID-19 pandemic are under attack. It's my job as the leader of the Labour Party in this council to get out there and to support them and stand in solidarity and to fight their cause and their plight. They're also often residents of our city. They love the public sector, they love the work they do, and it's for me to support that wherever I see it. Councillor Fletcher, you're right to draw attention to energy prices. In addition to that, there's lots of discussion at the moment in the Commons on prepayment meters and how people are self-disconnecting, basically because they can't afford to top up their prepayment meters. They're then freezing, unable to heat their home. And these prepayment meters are being forced on them when they default on payments. It's absolutely scandalous. And in addition to that, they often pay a higher tariff. So the government needs to do more significantly about this issue. You're absolutely right. In addition to that, we're really concerned about the withdrawal of support for local government, for schools, for a whole host of different organisations across our city. And thanks for drawing my attention to the WASPI campaign. It seems to me this government think retirement is some sort of luxury to be enjoyed really by the very wealthy and people who are well off. And when you contrast that with what's happening in terms of life expectancy, stalling and regressing during COVID, you start to think what's going on here. Is government making some calculations about how little they need to put into the pot in terms of how long people will be actually living in this country? And it's absolutely scandalous. Also, Councillor Kelly, thank you for your comments. And you know, you shared a personal anecdote about 16 days of strike. You're a member of 2 unions, and it's not just about pay, it's about T's and C's, it's about health and safety, and much of this has been fought for over many years. So there you go, that's a reason to look backwards, isn't it? I think you said 100 years, you know, some of the T's and C's that are enjoyed within the railway industry. And you're absolutely right. Workers are not trying to cripple the country. They're just asking for a fair settlement to enable them to get on and actually live their lives in the middle of a cost of living crisis. And we're not going to be going back 100 years, despite the Tories wanting us to do that. Councillor Rowland, storms, litter, quays, really important stuff. And I know this has been an ongoing issue down in that part of the city. And I thank our key workers who work tirelessly in all weather and all conditions to ensure that the litter is removed from the basins in the quays. And it is a tough job because as soon as we have bad weather, what happens is all the tributaries and rivers wash into the quays and therefore require us to regularly remove the debris and the waste. And it is quite tragic that Councillor Warren couldn't be here today to talk or contribute to this debate, but I'd like to place on record my thanks to the key workers who do a tremendous job for the residents and the communities of the quays. It's not easy, and it's especially not easy during the winter. Councillor Keeley, thanks for letting us know about the amount of money going into the NHS in Wales in contrast with England. You did note the 25p difference there. I find this quite fascinating that you somehow think that that's going to solve all of the problems of the NHS, which has been a long time in the making, and I did try to address this in my speech. You know, the removal of beds, the caps on doctors and nurses, the unfunding of the real costs of running the NHS when you factor in inflation, you know, and then the cumulative impact of all of that over time. That's why we're in the crisis we're in. And also, you know, government don't really want to tackle these issues, do they? You know, we're using private hospitals, we're using agency workers, we're recruiting staff internationally now, and this just seems to be the norm in terms of how we run the National Health Service in this country. Government have had years to deal with these structural issues, have chosen not to. Why? Because I suspect what they really want to do is hollow it out, create a crisis, and then what? Privatise it. That's where the government want to go with our National Health Service.
Excuse me, Cities Mayor, sorry to interrupt. We're coming up to 12:25. Are members happy to extend 15 minutes extension so the City Mayor can answer everybody properly and get through the business? Is everyone happy with that? Okay. Thank you. Sorry, carry on. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much. You did talk about one of your ministers being involved in a car crash, and you know, my thoughts are with the individual and their family at this time. I hope they're okay. But obviously, you referenced their Worsley roundabout, and we had an interesting conversation about the role of the scrutiny committee in terms of looking at the M60, M602, M62, and Worsley roundabout. This is something we are taking seriously, and I know colleagues here in the City Council working with TFGM colleagues are actively looking at what possibly could be done here moving forward, off the back of what's already been done, which you know is still continuing to create challenges for us, which I do absolutely acknowledge. And we've got to find a solution, and we've got to work together to find that solution, because as has been highlighted, Highways England or National Highways, they're an executive agency of the government. They're not accountable to Salford City Council. They're not accountable to this executive. They're actually accountable to the Department for Transport and the Secretary of State. So if we're serious about wanting to try and find solutions, both in terms of utilising their powers and ultimately how they prioritise their capital programme, but also importantly, their resources and their finance to enable us to do some of this work, then I do think it requires a lot more cross-party working, rather than coming to this chamber today and basically having a pop when you actually know that some of the challenges are attributable to the executive agency in question, which is outside of the purview of this City Council and our control. But just on public transport more broadly, because you did make a load of other points there. So if we look at somewhere like Luxembourg, tram is free in Luxembourg. People can move around freely. Why? Because the state subsidises it, pays for it. Do we have a system here in Greater Manchester at the moment? No, we don't. We do not. Andy Burnham often talks about a London-style system. What we're getting at there is basically public subsidy to enable us to run proper, robust services across the city region. In addition to that, there's obviously the history of public transport's been privatised, created chaos, whether that's rail, whether that's buses, and what we're trying to do now is get some coherence back into the system, a proper plan for transport here in Greater Manchester. And I'd like to think you'd be on board with this agenda to properly improve infrastructure and public transport and get the government to enable a London-style system to be delivered here in Salford and Greater Manchester. In terms of the last question around what's worse between the two roundabouts, I don't think I'll engage in that. At the end of the day, you know, everything matters in this city. You know, if people are going to raise significant issues that warrant consideration, then we will consider them. And that's absolutely what we will do. And I am taking the issues of Worsley roundabout seriously. And I think Councillor McCusker actually replied to say the work on the cycling roundabout actually saved us money. It didn't necessarily cost us money. So I'm not quite sure what you were trying to get at with your questioning there of officers. Quite why you weren't provided with that response, I'm not sure either, but we can follow up outside of this meeting. Councillor Warmisham, Agree with you again on food banks and the role of our community and voluntary sector, Emmaus, Loaves and Fishes. We know they do amazing work. And you're absolutely right, the Tories are totally out of touch with working people. And you were only telling me the other day over text messages how much casework you're getting in the ward of Langworthy from working people struggling to pay their rent, their mortgages, their bills, choosing between heating and eating. It's really quite concerning. And government has ruined this country, and you're absolutely right. It's working people, and it's the most vulnerable in society who've ultimately paid the price. And you're absolutely right to also say the Tories need to examine their conscience, because the empiricism, the data, the intelligence is there for all to see. And if you're interested in these things, get interested in the work of this council, because it's shocking what's going on at the moment. Just look at the data we've collated through Salford Assist. People literally not having enough to make ends meet. Councillor Sharp, thank you very much for your comments about John Davis. I thought that was really well said. You talked about him being a leader, a mentor, a friend, a tactician, a historian and a teacher. You know, they're really quite profound things to describe someone as. So he was clearly a very special man. I didn't know John very well. I obviously knew him. And often when I would meet him, he would be lobbying me to ensure that there were members in the mayoral team and the cabinet from Walkden and Little Hulton. He deeply cared about that part of the city, and he will be sorely missed, but never forgotten. And I think his legacy carries on, really, in other members in this chamber who he's clearly mentored in the right way. I also associate myself with the comments you made about how Councillor Garrido compared Kenya and Salford, almost as though, you know, if Kenya can do something, then, you know, Salford surely can, because, you know, Kenya's almost a third world country, was the suggestion there. It is inflammatory. It's not the right rhetoric for this chamber, and it borders on racism, to be quite frank. To be quite frank.
I'm sorry, I'm not being accused of racism in this chamber by anyone, just like you. I'm not a racist. Withdrawal.
Did you hear what I said? I said it borders on racism. I'm not withdrawing it. No, I think it does. It's not rhetoric we should be using.
Can we not have this across the chamber, please? One moment. Okay. Councillor Greedo, can you just sit down a moment, please? Sorry, City Mayor, what did you want to say in relation to that?
I'm not withdrawing my comment. I said it borders on racism. The important point here is borders.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, that was an accusation of racism, and I was withdrawn. That's not language for this chamber. You made somebody before a swear word earlier on. This is far worse, and I want that withdrawn.
Please not have a debate across the chamber.
I was just making the point that we've heard both views, and obviously there is no agreement on a way forward at this moment in time, so it is something that we can pick up outside of this chamber, but I cannot resolve it here.
Thank you very much. In terms of the comments around the guided busway, I think, again, you made some really valid points there, how that is a fantastic piece of infrastructure serving Lee, Walkden, Boothstown, many parts of our city, but was opposed historically by the Conservatives in this council. So, you know, on the one hand, they're arguing for improvements in public transport, but then they say they don't want it historically. It's quite Janus-faced, really, is what I would describe it as, looking both directions almost. I guess you could say popularist is another way of describing it. In terms of Worsley Roundabout, thanks for, you know, covering what happened at the scrutiny committee. I wasn't there, obviously, but it's really reassuring to know that you obviously initiated Highways England being there to grill them and to question them with regards to what they're doing in that part of the city. And then obviously the ongoing challenges around the wider network and the need to work together. I agree with that. You know, if we're serious about getting more out of Highways England, getting more out of the Department for Transport, we need the Conservative colleagues to work with us to enable that to happen, not against us, because ultimately the decisions are going to be taken elsewhere, be that in Highways England, be that in the Department for Transport, be that even at a Greater Manchester level if there is devolution taking place here. And again, your comments on trade unions, very well made. We clapped them as heroes during the pandemic, and now they're supervillains, and this is just absolutely scandalous. And the media are also fueling a lot of this rhetoric, a lot of this discourse. They're heroes. They will always be heroes, as far as I'm concerned. Councillor Pebbit, thank you very much for raising the points around schools. Just so you know, Salford schools, we're seeing cuts of £4.1 million in 23-24. That's £119 per pupil, impacting 83 out of 91 of our schools. So real material impacts going on in schools at the moment. And as we know, school spending has still not reached 2010 levels, so we're playing catch up. And the pay rise, as you highlighted, wasn't fully funded. And how do they pay for that pay rise? Sacking staff, be they teachers or support staff. It's absolutely scandalous what's happening in our schools. And our schools are so important. They're those critical nodes within our communities. They're also places where we can raise aspirations and hopes and dreams can actually be realised through those places. And it's tragic to see what's happening. You know, many teachers now are social workers dealing with welfare issues. Kids are coming to school without being fed. And there's lots of challenges as well in terms of poverty in the household, which is then impacting on schools as well. You also drew attention to some of the practices amongst transport. It's called P-coding, where they literally cancel trains the night before. I think it's 10 o'clock is the deadline, so it doesn't officially feature as an actual cancellation. I call it gaming the system. This should never have been allowed, and the government could have easily outlawed it, but clearly have chosen not to do that through whatever those franchise contracts do or don't say. Again, on buses, you highlighted the challenges around drivers, and thanks for your comments on debt. Councillor Wade, thank you very much for your comments about looking back and the importance of that, and you shared with us, obviously, the Tolpuddle Martyrs example, which is a really powerful and important example about the importance of trade unionism and the importance of right to strike. These are hard fought for rights that we enjoy today, and if we lose them, we absolutely do regress back to those days of poverty, deprivation, destitution. And that's where the government want us to go, but we absolutely need to keep on fighting. Councillor Youd, again, I associate myself with the comments you made there around bargain basement Britain and the Tories wanting to realise this, and you highlighted all the issues around NHS waiting lists, wage stagnation, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. But importantly, you talked about bread and roses and the importance of rugby league and obviously our community stadium in the city of Salford. And I absolutely associate myself with the comments you made. We need to hold on to these institutions, these roses in our great city, and we need to continue to deliver great things through them. Councillor Saunders, I think I answered your question on why I was on the picket line. It was very much in solidarity with the people who are striking. Councillor Merry, thanks for highlighting all the points around previous Prime Ministers and the Tory party's inability to agree on one and certainly sustain those Prime Ministers in post. And you're right, you know, the Royal College of Nursing never had a dispute with the government, but yet here we are, nurses going on strike. And you're absolutely right. Some of this rhetoric is driven by the polls, and obviously the Tory party being 20 points behind in the polls. Obviously government don't really want to focus on that. And, you know, you'll talk about local government financing. You're absolutely right. We're not going to be an Oliver. We're not going to be asking for more. We're going to be fighting every step of the way to make sure the people of Salford get the funding that they deserve. Councillor McCusker, I've responded on your point, I think, on the roundabout, so thanks for that. And then Councillor Lancaster, again, you make a really important point about the stadium and what we're doing in that part of the city. I think it was always envisaged that the stadium would be paid for by the land disposal and the land sales. And obviously you've heard today that the stadium is washing its face. Obviously there's been challenges with COVID, but it's still my hope and aspiration, and I think we're on track to hopefully ensure that those land transactions and sales pay back the development finance and the working capital. And obviously you highlighted as well the earmark reserve we hold in our own accounts from when the stadium actually pays us money and actually adds an interest onto that. But irrespective of all that, the big thing for me is the jobs we create there, the business rates we bring into the city council to support jobs and services in the city. We've regenerated a part of the city that would probably never have been regenerated because we needed NWDA money, we needed government support to enable us to remediate the land and get things going and moving and building again. And we shouldn't underestimate the impact of that on the people of Salford in terms of creating jobs and opportunities, but also on our own budget in terms of bringing the revenue in and the business rates in to protect jobs and services in the City Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, City Mayor. If we go now to item 15, general questions or comments to Cabinet members on the discharge of responsibilities. We've not received any questions with notice, so can we go to Councillor Tracy Kelly? Any questions for Councillor Kelly? No? Councillor John Merry? Councillor Charmaine August? Councillor Jim Kamel? Councillor Jack Yard? Councillor Bob? Oh, sorry, Councillor Breeder.
Yeah, Councillor Jack Yard was up because I think you missed one out. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the comments, in fact, that Councillor Yard made earlier regarding the stadium and the fact that he felt we should be privy to the figures. Can I tell you, in fact, that yes, we have had briefings, right? But during those briefings, unless we're prepared to agree to confidentiality, we're not allowed to talk about those figures. Now, I appreciate that Councillor Lancaster might be in a different position as a director, and he was able to talk about figures. I'm not able to do that because I'm bound by confidentiality, and the council should know that. However, I can relate to figures that were quoted in the newspapers, right? And the figures that I suggested, I believe, are perfectly correct. But can I also say, in fact, that we're not talking about the land deals. We were talking here about selling off our share as relates to the stadium itself, not the land. We would retain our interest in the land, and that would be the case again if the council buys the Peel's share of the stadium. They would be buying just a share of the stadium, not the land. So we retain our interest in the land, whatever happens to the stadium, on the basis of what I suggested. Just really wanted to clear that up.
Yeah.
I did understand that if you sold half the stadium, you'd lose your interest in the land that the stadium is on. That's what I was referencing.
There's land apart from the land that the stadium is stood on that we're selling separately, not the land that the stadium is actually on.
Yes, I know. But if you sold half the stadium, the land the stadium is physically sat on, you would lose. Of course you would. The land, you talk about the parcels of land around the stadium, I understand you saying that. I'm saying if you sell the half of the stadium, then the land the stadium is physically sat on, you would lose. You would sell that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor. Can we move on, please? Councillor Barbara Bentham, any questions for? I'm not talking now. Councillor Mike McCusker. Well, item 16, do members have any questions or comments to the chairs of scrutiny? Councillor Jim King doesn't appear to be here. He was standing in for Councillor Mullen, so sorry about that. Councillor Joshua Brooks, in the absence of Councillor Adrian Brocklehurst. Children's scrutiny. Councillor Stuart Dickman, Community and Neighbourhoods scrutiny. Councillor Irfan Syed, in the absence of Councillor Margaret Morris, Health and Social Care scrutiny. Councillor Robert Sharp, Growth and Prosperity scrutiny. Okay, just move on to item 17, questions or comments on the discharge of functions of joint authorities and outside bodies. Do members have any questions? Thank you. Item 18, schedule reports from board members. The following report is submitted for information with the intention it be noted, which is Salford Council for Voluntary Service Executive Committee. Okay. So, thank you very much then. That is the end of council business. Thank you for your attendance today.